Hey, just jumping into the pre-show here. Can everybody hear me okay? I'm getting weird levels here on my side, and I have no idea what's being sent out to the live stream. Drop me a comment if this is sounding like okay, or if I'm going like robot voice, or if it's staticky. Anyone? Hello, world. Check 1 2. It's okay, Juan. Loud and clear. I hear you fine. Okay, cool. All right, please enjoy the lounge music as we just wrap up this last minute. Thank you. All right, I believe this means we are live, ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, tech fans of all shapes and sorts and sizes and persuasions. Welcome to another episode of the Monday Morning Tech Chat Show, on the SGGQA podcast channel. I gotta plan ahead. One of these days, I'm gonna make it through the entire spiel in one breath. I gotta work on my lung capacity to pull that off. Hey, everybody! I'm Juan Carlos Bagnell, the AKA Some Gadget Guy, the SGG of this horrifically named podcast series. But the QA, that's the important part. As we're gonna get into some question and answer. We've got just an absolutely bonkers show for tech news and tech politics this week. I'm going to try and blow through some really heavy articles talking about sort of the politics of social media, because we're watching this stuff spin up in courts, and I'm not sure our elected officials are really up to the task of reining in some of the crazy. Then we can get into some of the fun stuff, as we've got a couple wins in that tech news space, and then I think we're all just excited about some of the stuff that's going to be coming out soon. I'm recording this on April 17th at 4 a.m. Pacific time tomorrow. We will finally have the official unveiling of the Xiaomi 13 Ultra, which I believe is going to have a good chunk of my Some Gadget Guy budget tied up. As much as I've loved using the Xiaomi 12S Ultra, it's crazy that I'm this excited for a year-over-year upgrade. So we've got a lot to get through. I hope everybody had a lovely weekend. Lex and I went out on a mountain biking ride. I shared a couple photos on the Discord. That little girl took her specialized road mountain bike. We did a 4-mile mountain biking ride. I could not have been more proud of her. I was a mountain biking instructor for the Boy Scouts. I was a camp director for a mountain biking program when I was 16. So I've always loved mountain biking. I'm not a very well-experienced road biking kind of guy. But we went out there, we hit some trails, we were dodging horses, lots of horse poop. But she ran that whole 4-mile course, and I was just super, super stoked. I gotta tell you, when you're pacing a 7-year-old doing her first mountain biking ride, and she's on a cute little specialized mountain bike with like a front suspension. She's just plugging along at her own speed. When you are pacing that kid in an 80-pound e-bike, fat tire e-bike, that is one of the most brutal workouts I think I've ever had, because I can't just blow by her, but I can't keep momentum going. So I'm constantly just keeping the entire weight of that bike at a steady speed. And it was so low on some of those hills that like I absolutely couldn't use the motor assist like at all, because that would have jacked me up to like 8 or 10 miles an hour and I would have just run right by her. So here I am just huffing, keeping this giant bike frame um, alongside her. And of course, I finally got some bags for the bike, and we had like a little picnic, and I was carrying all the weight, like all the water bottles, all of the snacks. I had a bike chain in there. I gotta figure out a better solution for security. But yeah, I'm feeling it today. That was pretty rough. So yeah, I hope everybody had a good weekend. Oh, Hawks, absolutely. Training your lung. Oh man, I can read. I'm only on one cup of coffee, so this could be an incredible podcast. I have no idea. Hawks says training your young lady early. That's awesome. She has been such a champ. I was really anxious about starting to get her up to speed on like riding alongside traffic and stuff. She's taking it really seriously, so I'm pretty stoked. I was gonna take a sip of coffee. Hold on one second. Oh, super fun, Hawks. Super fun. And as like we're starting to team up, because my wife has very little interest in like camping and outdoorsy stuff, and we're like, hey, but Lex and I are finding all of these fun trails that we can go and ride. And so I think my wife might start thinking like, oh, she could join us. Um, because we're going to get into a little housekeeping here. One of the things that finally I got to start talking about was a new e-bike. And we purposely picked up an e-bike that we thought would be a good fit for Marie, but it's more of a road bike than a mountain bike. So why don't we shift gears in? I like I said, I hope everybody had a lovely weekend. I'm going to try and condense some of my normal patter here so that we don't get too bogged down in the news block, because this is the kind of news block that could keep me talking for a couple hours. Let me get this out of the way here. Oh, Hawks, I love it. Hawk says I love biking and hiking. Man, we're finally starting to get out around our neighborhood. We finally starting to feel a little more comfortable, like really checking out what's around us. And we moved in to this place over a year and a half ago, and we've just like slowly been kind of expanding our circle of comfort. And the outdoorsy stuff is what keeps us sane, because we're still a little concerned about like Marie is the only one in the household who's gotten COVID yet. Yeah, I have no idea, even being vaxxed and boosted and all that stuff, I have no idea what my immune system is going to do if I pick up a respiratory issue like that. So we've been playing it super conservative. I've been going a little crazy. So the hiking and the biking, good times. So, yes, let's jump into some housekeeping real quick, because I finally pushed through a glut of videos and embargoes, and the end of this last week got kind of busy. So, starting off, I just had a quick little written review. EasyQuest sent out a little USB-C multimedia laptop hub. It's an 8-in-1 hub, USB ports, micro SD card reader. This one was kind of a special little hub for me, because we haven't seen a lot of hubs with USB-C splitter ports. So you would have a USB port, a USB plug that would plug into your laptop, and then you would get USB-A ports, the rectangle ones. We're finally starting to see more of these hubs arrive, where you plug in a USB-C and then you have more USB-C ports that you can use. So EasyQuest sent one over. I finally got a chance to test drive one of these, and I just wrote a review on it. I didn't feel like that needed to be a full-on produced video, so you can catch that on somegadgetguy.com. Getting into the videos, the folks at Velotrick sponsored another look. The point of this video is to talk about the difference between different classes of bicycle. So if you have an e-bike, there's a class 1 e-bike, a class 2 e-bike, and a class 3 e-bike. This is Velotric's first Class 1 bicycle. They actually started with a Class 2 with the previous e-bikes that I showcased on the channel. But this one is super streamlined. It's ultra lightweight, and it also has some interesting security features built into it. So this is the Velotric Thunder 1 ST, and for it being a super lightweight bike, this is less than half the curb weight of my fat tire bike. And so we've had Marie try out some of my other e-bikes and scooters, and they're so big and they're so heavy, they absolutely do not fit her at all. And it's a kind of concern, like, hey, you're walking this e-bike around. She would have difficulty just like rolling it up over a curb. I mean, an 80-pound frame with a basket on the back is a lot of bike to manage, even for someone like me, because I'm not like the beefiest, most ruggedly built individual hopping on that bike. I really got to kind of kickstart it almost like a motorcycle to get going efficiently. So this comes in at a much more reasonable weight. So I've got a whole video on this, and Marie actually pops up in the video. She does not hang out a lot in my videos or in my podcast, so it's kind of a rare appearance of Mrs. Gadget Guy. Then we had another sponsored video come out, the Rokid Max AR glasses, and I have been a huge advocate for portable displays. Any kind of portable. Dave is really trying to. You derailed my housekeeping here. Dave says, "You're not a beefcake stud, Juan." Oh, someday I'll show you my dad bod, but I am trying to be more of a father figure. Ba-bam. So, the Rokid Air, not Rokid Air, the Rokid Max AR glasses. I love portable displays. I think any type of portable screen is a huge upgrade for all the gadgets you really own. And you can get one screen and it's going to play nice with a bunch of different gadgets, right? It could, for some phones, for some tablets, laptops, game consoles. If you own this one accessory, it expands the use on a whole family of other gadgets. So the most exotic version of this right now is going to a wearable display, something that you put on your face and it projects an image out in front of you. And the Rokid Max are a significant, they are a significant upgrade over the Rokid Air that I reviewed sort of at the end of last year. My video kind of came out right around that kind of Christmas time season for the Rokid Air. I liked the Rokid Air, but each one of these headsets brings a very specific kind of focus to who might be the right fit for a gadget like that. So we had the TCLs, we had the Nreals, we had the Rokids, and each one I kind of felt was for a different kind of consumer. So the Rokid Max address a number of the criticisms that I had with the Rokid Air. I've got a full video that kind of breaks down some of those pros and cons. If you kind of want that generational idea, that sort of generational look at what these different things have looked like. Coppa Cash, Marie was ready to take over. I thought she did a really good job. She's super self-conscious about ever being on camera. And here I got her on camera riding a bike, which she really hasn't been riding bikes as often as I have. So she was a little sort of getting up to speed. Like I've got video of her very first ride on that Thunder 1. I thought she looked pretty good. But then she also like contributed some talking head stuff, like some of her experiences and some of her opinions on the bike too. I thought she was doing great. Again, like I'm definitely biased that my wife did a good job, but I think my wife did a good job. Ooh, JMX Warrior, that's not a bad idea. Replying to Fungi, he says, Juan challenged us to use an old phone for a month a few years ago. We need that challenge again. So Erica Griffin actually set up that challenge, the old phone challenge. I need to reach out to her to see how she's doing. I know she kind of stepped back a little from the production schedule that she had for her social media. This is another running theme of some of our favorite and most experienced tech creators just kind of slowly taking a step back because of the current climate of YouTube production right now. Okay, let me get this out of the way here. And then On the site, the other major video that we put out, the embargo lifted over the weekend, so it was a rare Saturday appearance for some gadget guy in publishing a YouTube video. But the Saramonic Blink Me wireless microphones with a magnetic mount and touchscreen controls. I finally got to take the wraps off these microphones here. They're in the style of the DJI or the Rode Wireless Go 2. It's a little receiver that connects to a pair of transmitter microphones. They come in a really well-stocked flight case with magnets and clips and mounts and cables and connectors. They have epic battery life, and they have on-device recording. So that's what we're listening to right now. This is the Saramonic Blink Me. I had a little weirdness with Restream setting up the stream, and I did a sound check during the pre-show just to see if they were sounding okay. They're definitely going to sound different than the Rode Wireless Go 2 that I usually use on this show, but I just kind of want to get a sense of what this sounds like. I've been trying to use them stealthily for my videos. So recently, if you've seen any videos where it's just a top-down camera and it's only my hands, these mics were under embargo, but I was using the audio from these mics on those videos where you weren't seeing me. And so there was one podcast that I also clipped them in for a bit, but I had to swap them back out because, again, Restream, I couldn't get a sense of what you all were hearing on the stream versus what I could hear while I was monitoring my own audio. It's always a little different. So Simon Says Hypno says maybe a bit more bass. That I'd say Simon Says Hypno. I would say you've got some pretty good ears though. If you catch this, there's this video by a guy in a doofy flat cap, and he's out at a park using these on location. I think the video name is Saramonic Blink Me wireless microphones, magnetic mount, touchscreen control, and epic battery life. There might be some conversation there about things like frequency response that could be a little different than some of the other wireless mics in this category. I suppose something like that could exist if you were interested in a more in-depth conversation and an actual field test of what these mics might be capable of. I love it. Here, let me get this out of the way. In fact, I saw that video. Good, Simon. Yes, Dave Burns. Okay, so Dave Burns is this the location where someone just looked into your camera as they walked by? I flipping love the video that we're getting from phones with 1-inch camera sensors. My Xiaomi is, where is my Vivo? So the Saramonic video that I shot, and I tried to show this off in the review. So it's the Saramonic Blink Me, but the entire video was shot from my Vivo X90 Pro. I cannot express to you how radical this setup is, where a phone with a little clip-on wireless mic and a receiver that kind of just snaps into a phone mount. So I've got a little phone mount, it's got a cold shoe, you slide in the receiver, you plug in a cable, and you push record, and the video and audio quality that you can get from a setup that simple with even just some natural light is astounding. This is a generational leap. So I'm sitting there and I'm doing this video and I'm out at a park and I'm trying to be conscious of people walking around. I'm trying not to point my camera directly at the playground. I really try to work against having like kids that I don't know be visibly recognizable in my videos. But there is one clip of this Blink Me where a woman is a little further down the path. And so, I mean, like, I could hear that there was a woman and a kid walking, but I figured they probably weren't visibly recognizable in my shot, but I didn't know. And so they walk behind me, and the depth of field that you can get from a phone camera sensor kept her totally blurred out. Like, you would not be able to recognize that woman from a clip in my video. You would not be able to recognize her kid. But as soon as she passed behind me, she actually kind of like walked closer and stared into my camera. So I had to cut and recut just a small piece of that video. And you can see like she walks behind my head and then she disappears. Like she vanishes in a portal behind my skull. So that was kind of like the problem was when she actually approached and got closer and like did this thing where she's like staring into the lens of my camera. I am so impressed what we can achieve in something this pocketable, where you know the size, the quantity of material that you need to produce at a much higher level is getting smaller and smaller and smaller. It is it's incredible. I absolutely love it. It just glitched. I don't know what that means. Hey, Paul the Tea Guy, always 20 minutes late. No, you're right on time, Paul the Tea Guy. The Tech Boy, you're asking some interesting photography-based questions. Can you turn the blur off? What if you want the backgrounds? What you were talking about is photography composition, because the blur that comes from a 1-inch camera sensor is not a digital effect. And this is the hardest thing to kind of get across for all the people who are used to iPhones and Samsungs with portrait modes and cinema blur modes and things like that. This is the natural focus fall off of the camera. And so when we get to talking about the Xiaomi 13 Ultra, there could be some interesting advances there too, which can help manage things like depth of field and focus fall off. But you're asking a photography question, not a digital editing question. And there is also a wonderful resource that you could tap for a bit more education on that topic. It's a book on Amazon called Take Better Photos, Smartphone Photography for Noobs. And it's written by this same doofus in a flat cap, but it explains some of those situations where you're working with a fixed aperture lens system. And if those words don't mean anything to you, then that book is going to get you schooled. It's going to get you up to speed pretty quick. So, one last little bit of housekeeping. I think I am going to republish this article on the blog, somegadgetguy.com. We've been seeing some of the sales numbers and some of the analyst reports coming out about things like VR headsets and AR headsets, the future of these kinds of new wearable and immersive screens. And I think everyone would kind of vibe. VR was hyped really hard a couple years ago. It found kind of a steady, comfortable user base, and it's been slow to expand from there. But whenever I see analysts making these kind of cherry-picked comparisons and then sort of speculating on what the future of that industry might look like, it makes me a little anxious. So one of the analyst reports that came out was really heavily saying Apple is the only company that can save VR. The Meta Oculus Quest Pro headset, the weird, stupid $1,000 headset from Meta, that only sold 300,000 units. If you're gonna say VR is ready for the mainstream, then that's not good enough. Apple is the only company that can come into this space and save VR. And I very much, I have a problem with that, because we still haven't kind of reined in the wild west of what VR and AR can accomplish, from more developer style kits like HoloLens down to our consumer grade wearable headsets like these they say AR glasses, but for me it's more of a wearable display than true augmented interactive experience. We still haven't even gotten consumers up to speed on a good heads-up display. When I had the when I had the Focals by North, I knew an N sound was in there somewhere. The Focals by North, all they did was bring a smartwatch style interface up to eye level. We still haven't found a good solution to sell that to consumers yet. That's how far behind we are. We can't replicate the function, the basic notification style function of a smartwatch, keeping it up in someone's field of view. The notion that like Apple's gonna walk into this space and define augmented reality in a way that's really going to secure this market and grow this market. Obviously, Apple is a company that can deliver at scale, but we also just recently saw another leak or rumor that Apple's AR headset might not be ready until 2026. And we've been hearing the rumors about Apple and AR and VR for like 5 or 6 years now. Ooh, next year could be the year they release their headset, with the same stupid image of a dopey pair of goggles that no one would ever want to wear on their face. So I wrote this up on the Patreon. VR success won't be decided by Apple. And it's just kind of a shorter look at some of the trends we've seen in this market, and then also how we do a terrible job of reporting success. Like, it's very difficult for anyone to tell me how many Xbox consoles have actually been sold. Microsoft doesn't disclose that exact number in their quarterlies anymore. It's just kind of lumped in with other parts of the Xbox brand, and they talk about profits because, you know, they also have a vested interest in pushing Game Pass. Really like Game Pass as a service. But they're not as keen on delivering the exact number of widgets sold like Sony. Sony really loves to tell you they've sold like 30 million PlayStation 5s. Cool. Microsoft doesn't do that. So when we talk about things like VR headsets, to cherry pick one headset like the Quest Pro and say, oh, it only sold 300,000 units. Well, what about the Quest 2? And what about the Quest 1? And what about PlayStation VR? And what about PSVR 2? And you can see, like, saying Apple can save this market when there's actually still a pretty healthy and robust collection of competition. To me, it's sort of a weighted statement that is just sort of designed to get the clicks from Apple fans to go, yeah, I'm very clever for never buying VR until Apple does it, because then Apple will just make it work. And that's lame. So that was a long, rambling housekeeping. All of the links, all of the articles that we're going to be talking about, everything's going to be available in this week's show notes on somegadgetguy.com. One quick comment from Dave Burns. This is how good Apple's marketing is. They have successfully branded themselves as the market definition and innovators when at best they're a slow follower. I feel to piggyback on your point, Dave, the reason why I get concerned about this sort of Apple brand worship, it makes sense for things that are easily defined and already categorized. Apple Watch didn't come in and have to teach consumers what a smartwatch was or what a fitness tracker was. Apple delivered a really polished version of it, and I still think Apple Watch is one of the best things that Apple has done to showcase how they can still polish an experience. But they didn't innovate that, they didn't create it, and they didn't have to educate consumers on it. VR is still one of those experiences you have to share person by person. People think they're ready or they understand what it's like, and then you put a headset on them and you still, to this day, get that, whoa, I didn't know it could do that kind of reaction. And I'm not talking about crazy graphics rich, immersive storytelling, video gamey, Half-Life Alyx types of experience. I mean, literally, I am still putting a ridiculously stupid, cheap Acer mixed reality headset on like the parents of my kids' friends, and then having them play Beat Saber, and this is still blowing their minds. Beat Saber is still the ambassador to VR, and as soon as you put those controller grips in someone's hands and they see the lightsabers and they're slashing and the music is going, then something clicks and VR is a completely different experience to what they thought it was. We're still, person by person, having to educate. What is it like to play a truly immersive experience? Apple hasn't shown that they have a roadmap for that. The closest we've gotten from Apple are some janky AR novelties. Oh, look, you can have like a little character walking around, or you can have emoji stickers or something like that. And the few times that we've also tried to push into some more practical demonstrations of AR, it's been kind of a novelty shrug, Apple really hasn't driven that conversation. So to have these editorialists go, oh, Apple's gonna say VR and AR and MR, and you're like, no, but they haven't shown that they can contribute anything to this. They're still like, oh, well, we put better sensors in the iPhone camera. Now you can do AR. Okay, I guess. Well corrected, Dave. The laser batons, Juan. The mouse owns Star Wars, so be safe. I will get a cease and desist by mentioning light sword. All right, who wants to get bogged down in some dirty politics? Someone else in the chat mentioned maybe talking about the Restrict Act. Please continue to put pressure on your elected officials. Please check out the EFF. The Restrict Act is bad juju. We do not want this style of internet management to gain traction. But what I want to talk about are actually some of the state and more local policies. Again, we have this sort of focus on some of the larger federal and international trends when it comes to regulating services on the internet. But so much of that gets informed by smaller policies, state and regional policies. And I'm doing this, obviously, if you've caught any of my podcasts, I am a left-leaning, bleeding heart, liberal type of individual. But when people kind of shrug off the both sides argument of liberals versus conservatives, these are the types of stories that I like to highlight next to each other, because there are things that we should be concerned about on both sides. I don't believe there is parity between those concerns. So while one of these stories is concerning and we should pay attention to it, I don't feel it rises to the same level of concern as the other two stories. So this is a trio. I'm going to staple these three stories together. I have the links. Please check out the articles. Don't just listen to me ramble on about them, and please read up on these bills that are going to state assemblies. We're talking about markets large enough to start defining trends on the internet. We're talking about states like California. Where California goes, the rest of the country often has to follow. We should be critical of state policy, even if it doesn't directly affect us in the state that we live in. So that's the preamble. I'm going to jump right in. First is an article from Motherboard. That's Tech by Vice, written up by Jules Roscoe. So let me screen share this. Arkansas makes it illegal for minors to be on social media without parental consent. The state governor signed a new bill requiring social media companies to obtain a photo ID of every new user to prevent teens from lying on the internet more. So, this is one of those, won't someone please think of the children? Won't someone please protect the children? And I feel in this chat right now, we would all agree that usage of social media in certain aspects can be detrimental to the experience of young people on the planet. I believe in terms of service and in how private corporations are managing their platforms, I think we would all agree that there's something distasteful about how some of this functions and how social media companies profit off of user data, how algorithms can drive and influence conversations, and we should be concerned. We should be concerned about how much time people spend on these platforms and how they're being utilized. I feel, and I feel like a number of people in this chat would agree with me, that the solution being from Arkansas, now whenever you sign up for a social media service, you have to give them a scanned copy of your credentials, personal identifying information, linked specifically to your private information, and that is often used in verifying your identity and then also for things like banking, that this maybe is not the best way to handle this. Given the track record of these social media platforms, not doing a great job of securing our personal information. We're getting reports and news stories of leaks and bad actors, breaking through the security of these services. Um, I don't want more private information verifying my identity and tying all of my accounts saved in a corporate server like Twitter's. I feel that would be bad for everybody in terms of privacy and security because we also haven't shorn up the security of these platforms. They're leaky. They're very leaky platforms. And whenever there is some kind of fallout from one of these major institutions like a Twitter or a Facebook, the corrective action is often just a slap on the wrist. Oh no, you leaked everyone's data, and it's going to take us weeks to kind of weather the fallout of our information being leaked out on the internet. But ooh, bad social media platform. Here's a fine. We're going to fine you a whole $1,000,000, and then make sort of a security policy change. Do all that, and you've learned your lesson. So I'm not okay with that. So we definitely need to address how kids are coming into social media. I feel like that is appropriate for a conversation to be had, and it has to start with parents, but parents are going to be woefully insufficient for policing that kind of activity when the whole rest of the world is radically and quickly adopting new social media platforms and new experiences, and kids are kind of informing that amongst their own peer groups. We need something. I don't think it's this. Yeah, Dave. Given how we made sure Equifax kept our social security numbers, yeah, Equifax didn't do such a good job of that. and yes, Copy Cash, exactly. Now when they get hacked, every user is now doxxed. And not just doxxed, imagine all of the crime that can run rampant with someone's driver's license. You want to sign up for Identity Theft Central? Then just find any leak or hole you can in Twitter, and you can immediately cause a significant amount of damage there. See, I mean, McCorcoran, it's difficult, right? So McCorcoran's saying just make it so parents can lock kids out of these sites in the settings or something like that. And that works for parents who are actively involved, and we know for a fact that this stuff gets out of the hands of parents. And we have to have some of these other more grown-up conversations about what do we do with private platforms and these business institutions, and how do we keep people safe. But it's a constantly moving target. So as we start addressing some of the concerns of today, the platforms are going to change before we finish that conversation. Paul, I know what you're talking about. Paul the T guy says, the UK tried doing that with certain websites where you had to put your credit card detail in to prove your age. You are correct though, Juan. And you know what's so funny is, I'm obviously still concerned about something like credit card data in the hands of a platform that might not be able to secure it well, but I feel a tiny sliver better about a credit card verification system than I do scanned copies of my driver's license living on a Twitter server. Like, just to be on Twitter, if I had to give them a credit card to say I am a grown-up, I would be like 3% feeling better about Twitter having that information than having a full-fledged copy scanned of my driver's license. Yeah, but again, it's going to be an arms race, right? As soon as you do something like that, kids who want to be on social media will find ways around those kinds of protections. So that moves us into the next story. And this story, I just want to preface, I don't cover a lot of topics that I feel warrant, say, like trigger warnings, but the concepts of this bill in Texas start dealing with some incendiary topics in the political sphere that haven't been appropriate for me to discuss on this podcast, or what my feelings of them might be on this podcast. But this is a social media tech story that wades into those waters. So this is coming by way of Wired, written up by Victoria Elliott. Let me get the screen share up here. Texas could push tech platforms to censor posts about abortion. If passed, the proposed law would also require internet service providers to block websites that discuss the topic. I've read through this article. Again, I want you to not just listen to me ramble. These are very important discussions and topics, and I hope you will go through and read this. The write-up from Wired isn't that long, but again, it's well quoted, it's well sourced, there are plenty of links that you can dig a little deeper, and this is another one. For conservative politics to highlight and promote smaller government, it is concerning when one state government is forcing social media, and these are private institutions, these are private companies companies are people, according to Citizens United, that they are able to dictate to the platform what they can and cannot publish. This is a very big concern. This is not free speech absolutism. This is a free speech issue where, again, as a platform, the Texas government is saying you have to publish stuff like this that we agree with, and you're not allowed to publish stuff like that, which we disagree with. We run into those issues of free speech where being able to say anything technically isn't free speech, not in the most political sense as guaranteed a right by the First Amendment of the Constitution. But we've enshrined in court cases the protection against compelled speech, where a government cannot force an individual or a company to publish something that they disagree with. Now Texas is getting into a more direct conflict with internet companies, saying not only if Twitter is found to have tweets talking about this topic, then Twitter is going to be against the law in Texas, but also Comcast is going to be responsible for also managing what's on Twitter. We want to talk about slippery slopes. This is a very concerning trend because it starts tagging larger and larger and larger pieces of the chain, pieces of the internet, to block speech about a medical procedure. I have big concerns about what the ramifications of this might be. When Texas starts fighting internet service providers about the content that's being published on social media sites, I feel that is a horrific overstep of the power entrenched in a state government. And not only that, I feel it reeks of gross hypocrisy where often the conservative talking point is some kind of notion of free speech absolutism. This law is not being enshrined in Texas. I mean, it hasn't passed, but this proposed law is not being set up to defend against hate speech, against white supremacy, or against any other troubling topic that we might be facing in this country right now. Weaponized disinformation from Russia, totally fine. You want to lie to people to convince them that a political opponent is like eating rodents in the basement of a pizzeria? Cool. Share that all you want. But if you bring up a topic that is a medical concern that the Texas Assembly disagrees with, well, now we got a problem. And we've got a problem where it's not just contained to that social media platform, it's a problem for the internet service provider that fuels the pipe, has no relation to the content or the social media service, and they are implicated and involved in this too. Texas is trying to do to the internet what they did with their power grid. They're trying to wall it off from the rest of the country and from the rest of the world. And if I were a Texas citizen, I would be very concerned about that kind of overreach. That is a huge step in managing what we're allowed to see on a telecommunications infrastructure. So yes, yet again, we're running into these issues. If this were to pass alongside something like the Restrict Act, then someone in Texas would also be criminally liable for using things like VPNs to then access information on medicine or medical procedures if it ran afoul of the very loose and broad definitions of this Texan bill. I feel this is very concerning, and I think it's something that more of us should read up on. And Texas is a big enough market where if this were to pass and be sort of approved by the courts based on whatever precedent the local courts are going to establish, then we're going to be in for a really rough fight of what information is allowed to be viewed by Americans. This fight is going to be brutal. This is also, to a degree, the same way that Texas has tried to manipulate the flow of textbooks to the rest of the country. You know, oh, we're not going to buy this textbook if you talk about things that we don't like, and then that can harm publishers that are trying to make textbooks. So they end up making a textbook that satisfies Texan requirements, even though that wasn't what the rest of the country was interested in. It's the same thing. California, we put all these regulations on cars, and people got all mad because it made cars more expensive, but it also made them less polluting. We have a lot of cars in California, but that changed the market for the rest of the country. You're welcome, America. This is sort of the bad version of that. But I didn't want to leave this completely, oh, Juan is going to sit here and trump up politics from conservatives, but then give the liberals a pass. I got an email. I got a press release. I'm not going to put it up here because there's information in it. Oh no, I've got to find it again. I didn't leave it up because I wasn't going to put it on screen, but I got an email about California AB 587. And this is coming from a PR company. Enacted in 2022, AB 587 imposes reporting requirements on social media companies related to misinformation, disinformation, and hate speech, among other categories of speech. In the suit, our company alleges that the law violates the First Amendment, is unconstitutionally vague, and violates the free speech guarantees in the California Constitution. This is a quote from the CEO of said company. Governor Gavin Newsom and others who gave us AB 587 could not be more clear. This law is openly about keeping people from exercising their right to create and publish constitutionally protected speech. So then they pitch it, you know, I'm reading through this and they're like, actually, yeah, that kind of vibes. California can definitely bureaucratically overstep too. I've agreed with many of the California state legislature's stances on things like net neutrality. But maybe I didn't read into 587 as closely as I should have. Then there are a couple of red flags where some of the people quoted as supporting this are people that, like, I don't feel are earnest participants in political discourse as much as they are rabble-rousers that have an agenda where if you didn't block hate speech on social media networks, it would empower the kinds of conversations that they have. And then they also like, oh, and yeah, and our CEO had this great conversation on the Joe Rogan Experience, and oh boy, that makes me really anxious too. I don't, again, feel like that's a great platform for the dissemination of reputable or verifiable information. It's kind of taken a turn as Joe moved to Texas, of all places, to escape taxes and stuff, and sort of sequestered himself in a little bubble of being $100 million wealthier from Spotify money. Okay, so I wanted to pull up Assembly Bill 587. Assembly Bill 587 has some concerning stuff in it. It is going to be exceedingly difficult for social media platforms, I feel, to live up to the letter of this bill. But how it's enforced and how this bill is enacted, you can see what you can see what the thought was, but I feel like some refinement of 587 is definitely going to be in line, especially for this having been signed into law late 2022. Real quick, before we jump into 587, I just have to go the J-Man150 gifted a tier 1 sub to Tony Surround and to Nakapaz. Thank you so much, J-Man150. Again, I mean, like, y'all blew my mind last week and hitting the hype train and doing all the subs, and I can't thank you enough for supporting, especially as I'm rambling on about politics right now. And I promise this is the one that's going to wrap us up on the heavy politics conversations. But I wanted to pull this up because the whole thing about, well, they're trying to rein in hate speech and disinformation. I want to read part of just this is the Legislative Council Digest. So this is just like the summation of what 587 is trying to accomplish. This bill would require, hold on, let me get this there. Okay. This bill would require a social media company, as defined, to post their terms of service for each social media platform, as defined, owned or operated by the company in a specified manner and with additional specified information, subject to certain exceptions. The bill would define terms of service to mean a policy or set of policies adopted by a social media company that specifies, at least, the user behavior and activities that are permitted on the internet-based service owned or operated by the social media company, and the user behavior and activities that may subject the user or an item of content to be actioned as defined. This bill later goes on. There is, chapter 22, section 1, chapters and subsections and A, B, C, D, E, individual pieces. And I'm going to link directly to this bill. But the bill is only designed to hold companies to the standard of their terms of service. It is not a law that, like, the company or the corporation that owns social media and news outlets delivers their terms of service in an easy way to be found on their company sites. You can always find the terms of service that you agreed to. You signed up, you clicked the box, I agree to the terms of service, and then somewhere on the website there is a terms of service. This law is basically saying, if in the terms of service they say they can remove content for reasons, they need to tell you what those reasons are. And if they aren't removing content that violates their own terms of service, they might face a fine. And the fines are thousands of dollars per violation per day. I believe up to $15,000 per violation per day. So if in the terms of service they say, hey, we don't allow hate speech, and then you go and you look through some audit of the content that's being posted, and it's a whole bunch of people saying, I don't like these other people and I think they should be blah, blah, blah. Well, that would be a violation of their terms of service. The company is not living up to their side of the terms of service, and California says, well, that they should face a fine. This is all built on how the social media site defines their own relationship with the people on their platform. So if in their terms of service they say, we reserve the right to remove content if it violates this part of our TOS, and then they don't do it, then California says, well, you didn't live up to your side of the bargain, so we're going to fine you for that. If the company decides to alter their terms of service, that's up to the company. If the company decides, oh, well, we don't care about advertisers liking our platform, so we'll be a free speech absolutist social media site, and then these companies can come in and say whatever, these people can come in and say whatever. As far as I can read through this, it would be a stretch for a California district attorney to go after that site. It's kind of like the FTC. The FTC exists to verify the manufacturer's claims, the manufacturer's detailed relationship with the customer. The FTC can't overstep that. So if in the terms of service, as according to the FTC, let's say a company's like, oh, if you do business with our product and it doesn't do this, then we can't be held liable. Well, the company disclosed that. So the FTC really doesn't have teeth to go after that company. It was in the agreement that you signed. It reads in California like, as long as the terms of service are clear, a company could say, we are not going to remove content that violates these ideas of things like hate speech. I don't know any platform, I don't know any other corporation that would want to advertise on a platform like that. But if you want to run your social media outlet that way, this bill doesn't seem to infringe on that. If your terms of service say, hey, we're going to do this and we're going to police our content, and we've got this kind of verification process, and then you don't live up to that, then the bill is going to step on you. So, is 528 worded vaguely enough to be abused? Absolutely. But what is the root of 528? The root of this bill is the company has to do what they said they were going to do. And I feel like this is the major difference in application between the conservative policing of social media services and the liberal policing of social media services. The liberal policing of social media services could absolutely be abused, but is a direct commentary on the relationship between the end user on a social media platform and the corporation that owns the social media platform. And this bill is trying, probably unsuccessfully, but is trying to get the company to live up to their promise in this business agreement. The conservative flavor of this is about policing speech they find objectionable, but then allowing speech that they find will benefit their cause in a very Orwellian way, while also advertising smaller government. As liberals, we're not advertising smaller government, but we are trying to keep corporations accountable for the promises that they make. I feel that is a tangible difference in the policies that we see between the different sides of the aisle in our political conversation. Whew. Sorry, Aditya just caught me. That was glorious. Aditya Anil, the FTC exists to not let Eminem be. I believe it's the FCC. The FCC won't let me be me. So yeah, okay. So there's a conversation kind of trickling a little bit back and forth that the wording on this is a little open to interpretation. So I completely agree with the stance that this bill is problematic, but it's problematic in the execution of when violations might be defined. It is not problematic from the instance of creating a culture of litigious state action against topics that are freely shared across the internet. This is very difficult legal wrangling and legalese to read through all of this and kind of understand where it might be applied or how it might be applied. And that is absolutely fair. But I feel at the core is something that we can build off of, and I feel it's fair to start looking at corporate behavior. I think it's fair, you every single day, you have agreed to pages and pages of legal definitions of interaction with services and platforms and corporate mega institutions. And at some point, it needs to be okay to look at the corporation and say, but you didn't do it. You're expecting your users to play fair, but you didn't. 528 needs some work. It really does. But it is a place to start the conversation. Paul the Tea Guy, this is where we definitely need to be, because laws are these cumbersome, clumsy broadsword actions. And the regulators need better scalpel tools for a future of internet communication. Sorry. Paul the Tea Guy says, so many laws have massive loopholes for abuse. Open source is another area I feel gets abused by patent companies, especially in China. And I feel China learned it from us in the US. I mean, let's be fair. Where abuse of open source software started, they might have taken it to another level, but they learned it from watching us. So I'm bringing this up because I am a liberal, left-leaning individual, and I have very big concerns over the application of law. If we talked about it a little while back, the TikTok hearings didn't matter if there was an R after the name or a D after the name. I think we all felt like our elected officials were way off the pulse. This was a bad showing for the people that we have put in positions of power and who are tasked with writing the laws that are going to govern the next stage of the internet. And they left us with zero confidence in their ability to do that. And immediately out of those hearings, what did we get? We got the Restrict Act. That is not okay. But when we look at some of the state and local policy, I think we see a profound difference in the tone of the conversation and the application of law, which is a tangible difference enough for us to vote, to make our voices heard, and to join this conversation. So I hope you will. I hope you'll be a good resource for family and friends, but above all else, if stuff like this frustrates you, or if stuff like this angers you, I hope you'll stray from social media and go directly to the source. Anytime you think, hey, I'm going to tweet this, don't. Email it. Email it to your local elected official. Email it to a city council. Email it to a senator or someone in Congress. They're not going to pay attention to an individual tweet on Twitter, especially now. CBC has also been labeled state-funded media. We need to affect change more directly, and we need to put the pressure of the conversation back into a more traditional form that these ancient dinosaurs of politicians will understand again. Because they don't get it. And we need them to get it, because this stuff matters, and a lot of people get hurt when they make big, dumb mistakes with brutal, broadsword laws that cannot account for a changing marketplace of technological evolution. Sorry, I'm going through a couple comments here, and there's some great back and forths. I'm going to leave the conversation in the chat for people to participate in the chat. I'm not trying to silence anyone's speech here. I understand my ramblings are one side of this conversation, and it's not the only side of this conversation, but I feel if I was raised as a sort of a cloth coat style conservative on military bases. You know, I was a kid at the tail end of the Reagan administration into the Bush administration. My dad is retired Air Force. My grandfather has a building named after him in Los Lunas, New Mexico, and he was a card-carrying member of the GOP. He was a card-carrying member of the GOP when I feel the conversation was a bit more earnest and honest as it pertained to things like fiscal responsibility. Now I don't believe that is true anymore. And that's where my politics have veered significantly more leftish. Simon says hypno. Pinko alt-right Juan has canceled me. The combination of words, Pinko alt-right Juan, just broke my brain. Because I've been, man, someone really went after me on YouTube. Like, it was probably about 2 years ago. And I put up another editorial about something political, and it was a video. It wasn't a part of a podcast. And like, you have no business talking about this. This is for people of color. You are an alt-right operative trying to do harm to this conversation. And like, just went off on all of my videos, calling me. And it was like that kind of word salad where it's like, you're a commie alt-right fascist. And you're like, yeah, that's not how any of that works. That's okay. Quick roundup of other news. We've got a couple fun and interesting stories, and then I want to get to one win. It's a win for a political story. First up, we were just talking about how Angry Birds is in dire straits. Rovio pulled their classic version of Angry Birds because it was making too much money, and their cash grab gotcha mechanic games weren't making as much. Well, Sega might buy out Rovio for $1 billion. So when we talk about companies like Rovio, there's always that kind of chatter about, well, they haven't made a great game in a while, they're kind of on the decline, blah, 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 blah. Rovio games pull in so many microtransactions and so many gotcha gambling mechanics now. Sega, the company that used to be a juggernaut force in gaming but is now also kind of quietly on the decline, is able to raise $1 billion to buy out Rovio. I feel like our perception of what is popular in gaming is woefully out of touch with the realities of how mobile games are monetized. Like, we think it's bad. We think people are dumping money into these microtransaction, in-app purchase laden games. It is at a scale that I cannot comprehend. If Rovio can be valued at $1 billion, and I haven't heard of any of their games outside of Angry Birds Classic in the last couple years, oh dang, that's nuts. And then one other tech story. This is very, very early into the conversation, but we need to keep our eye on it. We've been talking about different chips and processors, ARM versus x86 versus RISC. We might be seeing some more progress on RISC soon. But ARM getting a little bit more restrictive in how they do licenses. Qualcomm is still, I believe, in court over what new processor cores might be coming to future Qualcomm chipsets. Samsung, their foundry is kind of struggling. This is kind of a big deal partnership that I don't know what the ramifications of it are going to look like, but this is interesting to see resources and capabilities between two different organizations kind of join forces. If Qualcomm is looking at using ARM licenses, but coming up with their own processor cores, ARM wants to make sure that their designs have a healthy market too. So we might see a future where some phones and tablets have Qualcomm, some have MediaTek, and then some are going to be coming out of the foundry that is partnered between ARM and Intel. So Intel's foundry has been ramping up on their production process. For a long time, there was the joke that Intel couldn't break 10 nanometers. But now Intel has something that they call the 18A process. This is really heady stuff. I'm not going to get too much into the science of it. I'm really hoping that Dr. Ian, Tech Potato, will comment on some of this in the future. I'm going to hit him up and bug him in the DMs, just like, hey, if you could explain this for someone who has like who studied theater in college, I would really appreciate it. Intel stopped doing the whole nanometer designation and they started talking about their different processes. So when they stepped down to a 7 nanometer process, they called it Intel 4. And by Intel's metric, how they were measuring die shrinks was close to, I'm explaining this very poorly. How they measured a die shrink, even though technically their process was larger, they believed it was comparable to another type of process at a smaller scale. So the Intel 4 process is a 7 nanometer chiplet, but they believed that that was similar to what another company might advertise as a 4 nanometer processor. We've done this a lot, like AMD way back in the day, like back in the like Thunderbird days. They would list out a processor, or Athlon. This is actually a bigger deal during the Athlon days. They would name a processor the AMD 3000. It was really clocked at like 2.4 gigahertz, but it was supposed to perform similarly to an Intel processor at 3 gigahertz. Intel was doing something like that with some of their foundries' designations of what the process was supposed to resemble compared to their competitors. Their newest and most refined version is the 18A. They're working with ARM, and it looks like ARM and Intel are going to start looking at manufacturing and distributing different types of chips. So a corporation who doesn't have a foundry, like MediaTek doesn't run their own foundry, could now approach Intel and say, hey, we would like to utilize this node. Can we also get on your assembly line if TSMC is totally sort of occupied? Like Apple can buy up all of TSMC's manufacturing capabilities. Having another player in this like Intel is going to be a huge strength for the competition of this market. Especially as we see like Samsung still hasn't kind of gotten this done. Samsung Foundry is kind of struggling to catch up to the maturity of TSMC's process. That was really badly explained. I'm so sorry. But read the press release. I've got the press release linked, and you can get a better idea of what Intel and ARM are going to collaborate on than me just rambling about it. And lastly, for the news block, it's so rare on this podcast that I just get to say, hey, this was a win. We've been talking about concepts like right to repair. And Hugh Jeffries just came out with another video talking about the policy, Apple's repair policy, making it even more difficult to fix gadgets, and it's sort of a maudlin topic right now, because between Apple and Samsung here in the United States, I don't see a path to victory for right to repair. Even if we were to start getting some more of these laws on the books, Apple and Samsung can fight with other types of like patent warfare, and you can tie up companies in courts for years, and they have the money to dump into lawyers that even if they lose, they can kill their competition with a decade of courtroom shenanigans. And they're not really earnestly trying to fight this. It's more like, hey, we know we'll use, but we'll bankrupt you in legal fees while we lose. So, let me get this out. Muppinish. I want to tell you about it. I don't know. I was going to say, I think it's a big deal. Muppinish says, Juan, after talking for 15 minutes about chip manufacturing, you go read it instead. No, I am telling you about the article because I want you to go and read it. I don't sit here and read the whole article because I want you to give a click to the company that actually published this. Before AI completely decimates Reuters, they're actually doing the reporting. So go to Reuters.com and give them a click. But I'm going to tell you about the article here because it is a win. Colorado passes first U.S. right to repair legislation for farmers, written up by Bianca Flowers. This was published back April 12th. Colorado farmers will be able to legally fix their own equipment next year, with manufacturers including Deere & Co. Obliged to provide them with manuals for diagnostic software and other aids under a measure passed by legislators in the first U.S. state to approve such a law. And again, people in the rest of the country need to write Colorado a glowing letter of thanks. Get out your nice stationery and your nice calligraphy pens and write them a huge thank you. Because once you can kind of pierce that veil, once you can wedge just the sliverest, tiniest little crowbar of separation into that, that information is no longer going to be as strictly guarded or as proprietary. It opens up the conversation for the whole rest of the country. So even if you're staunch free market business libertarian farmers who rely on federal subsidies to keep your farms running, so you're cool with socialism to aid your business, but you're against free healthcare or something like that, you'll have access to this kind of data and information simply because Colorado broke it open and made it easier for farmers to get their hands on this type of information to better manage their own equipment. It opens it up for everybody. I really feel California should have been leading this conversation with our infrastructure and our manufacturing and our farming industry, but Colorado beat us. Colorado got there first, so kudos to Colorado. Like, I did write a letter like, hey, guys, Colorado's gonna beat us here, and I didn't get any reply from the California Assembly. So that's a biggie. That's a really big deal in how locked up this market is, how anti-competitive these business practices are. And with a win like this, we now have state precedent to start having conversations about things like washers and dryers, refrigerators, microwaves, TVs. We can't keep playing this game of pretending that like a screen in a phone is some kind of special, magical, proprietary information that will allow Samsung to prevent parts from coming in to fix your tablet. That's not okay. Legally, it's totally protected because of the way that we handle IP law. But realistically, that's not okay. So we need to figure out the wedge issues that will actually get people to vote on these things and support these initiatives. Started with farmers. Now it's time to make sure that people don't lock up automobile repair stuff into overly punitively proprietary legal bubbles. So I'm very excited. This is very good news. It warmed my heart, my angry soapboxing, politically minded heart. This one was a very big deal. Right to repair for farmers, enshrined in the Consumer Right to Repair Agricultural Equipment Act, passed Colorado Senate. So we got a stepping stone. We've got a toe grip that we can now keep climbing this wall and hopefully make this better for everybody. What works for farmers here will work for everybody and will be better for everybody. Oh, and Paul, yeah, absolutely. Again, like we've talked about this a number of times on the podcast too, where like EU regulations go, we Americans get to benefit because it changes the global conversation, even if we don't have a specific law for it here in the United States. Paul the Tea Guy says, some companies that have to obey the EU version of right to repair patent parts, so you have to buy direct from them behind their walled garden. Overall, though, getting the parts you need is a winner, even if it has to be the OEM part. Now, beyond that, what we're seeing is this is the first step at chipping away at the business practice of doing something like making a repair part, serializing it, and preventing another repair entity from getting the software that can recode for the serialized part. You replace the screen on an iPhone, if a third-party repair shop does that, they can't tell the iPhone that it's a compatible screen. So things on the iPhone break. So you have to go to an Apple Genius, you have to go to an Apple store. They can replace it and recode the software so the phone will recognize it. And this is where I absolutely have to point out the amazing work done by Hugh Jeffries. Go check his channel, especially when it comes to Samsung and Apple. He's one of our best resources for talking about these business practices and showing. Every single time a new phone comes out, he buys 2 of them to show you, if I swap the parts from these 2 phones that I bought from Samsung, look at what breaks. Look at what no longer works, even though we know these are Samsung verified parts. We know that they're compatible. They came from the exact same model of phone. There's nothing janky going on there, but literally a tiny little serial number in the software is preventing this part from working on this other phone. And you don't have access to the software to verify that part. That's what we need to start breaking. It'd be like, oh, you've got an alternator in your 1989 Toyota Camry. I've replaced the alternator in an 89 Camry. It takes a 10 millimeter socket set. That's it. Like, I mean, if you want to get fancy, you can also like get a fancy belt tensioner, but I just eyeballed it. Like, I just did it with my fingers. Like, it took me an hour. It would be like saying, hey, if you want to do that kind of work on a 2020 Toyota Camry, well, you can't, because the alternator has a serialized barcode that the car computer doesn't recognize, so it shuts your car off because it could be a counterfeit alternator. And you're like, well, I don't feel like that's acceptable. In the 90s is when we mandated the OBD2 plug-in. So there's like a little car computer port. You plug in, you can plug in anything. Like, I had a Bluetooth mileage tracker plugged directly into my car computer. But like, that's also how you get like, how they monitor like the engine and the error codes, and when you go and get your car smog tested. We standardized that port. And we should do that with everything else. It should be an open standard that people can communicate with. And it's really cool. Like, if you have a car, go get one of these little Bluetooth pucks and you can see all of the data that comes off the engine car computer. I had an error code pop up. The check engine light went up on our newer Nissan. It's still a pretty old Nissan now. Before I took it into the shop, I got the puck that I used for my mileage tracking, plugged it in. I got an app. It registered what the error code was, and I could talk directly to my mechanic saying, hey, yeah, this is what the problem is, and this is what the error code is reporting. And before I take it in, like, this is what I think we need to do and have it prepped. And a repair that would have taken like 3 days, they were already able to order the part. I brought it to them the afternoon they received the part, and I got it back that evening. Because we didn't have to play this dance. Well, let's take it for a test drive and let's get the engine code to go up again and you can check this. It was awesome. Take control of how you handle, manage, support, and repair your own products, and it's better for the life cycle of the product, and your money is way better spent. You get better longevity out of those parts. So that's all the political stuff. No, we ran long on the news block. I am so sorry. Yeah, Gormlord and Hugh Jeffries has talked about this a lot too. I'm not going to do credit to that conversation as well as Hugh. My job is to point you to Hugh's channel so that you will also share his content. Gormlord saying those pictures you see of stacks and stacks of useless iPhones and iPads are so sad. It's pretty rough. Yeah. Ooh, excuse me. Got an unexpected coffee burp there. So I'm going to quickly skip over most of my spiel about the subreddit, but I've got 50 people watching the stream right now. If you go to reddit.com/r/glowing rectangles and drop a couple upvotes, you can radically change the listing of the top stories of the week. Right now, the #1 story on reddit.com/r/glowing rectangles is me sharing a photo of LumaFusion running on my Moto Edge Plus, plugged into a portable monitor, and showing a full screen view of my preview while I'm editing video on the phone. That was the #1 most upvoted post on reddit.com/r/glowing rectangles. And then the #2, one of the reasons why I'm not digging too heavy into the Restrict Act this week is because of the #2 post on Glowing Rectangles. This is coming by way of Shannon Morse, who has still not broken 100,000 subscribers. This is a travesty. Shannon Morse should have 1 million subscribers, but she is still kind of hanging out at around 98,000. The Restrict Act is worse than you think. The TikTok ban bill from Shannon Morse. And the thumbnail has a subtitle, Jailed for Using a VPN ? This is a great video. Shannon Morse knows what's up. She is one of my first resources to talk to when it comes to things like security. Dave Burns got me interested in hardware keys to do two-factor authentication. And the hardware key that Dave Burns recommended, Shannon Morse had some videos about. So this is the UB code, the UB key. Absolutely check out her content if you care at all about your security or privacy. But that video, being the second post on Glowing Rectangles, was a very good look at the Restrict Act. So again, mirroring what we've heard from the EFF, mirroring what we've heard from outlets like Rossman Group, Shannon Morse when it comes to security, and she's been a big advocate for using two-factor authentication and for using VPNs. This is a conversation that is completely up her alley. You should absolutely pay attention to it. And you can catch it, if you go to the top posts of the week on reddit.com/r/glowing rectangles, it is the #2 post of this week. Give it a share, give it some upvotes, give it some support. She is making fantastic content that does a better job of protecting you and keeping you safe. So, I've got an article in here. I don't know that we need to spend a lot of time on it. Again, it's another one that I want to point you to because it's the actual scientific study, not an editorial on it. But we've been talking about things like hearing loss. It's a passion project of mine. I did the 2020 hearing project where I did a couple of videos that focused on hearing health and some of the science on hearing loss. This is another study out of the UK that links hearing loss with dementia and brain degenerative diseases. I'm not going to sum it all up. Give it a read. It is not a causation. As far as I understand, this is still not saying if you lose your hearing, you will suffer dementia. But there is a strong correlating trend with people who are more susceptible to hidden hearing loss and more overt hearing loss and facing brain degeneration later in life. It's another study. Take care of your ears. Stop doing this, oh, but I've already got tinnitus and I already can't hear things, waka waka. Preserve what you still have. Treat your ears better. Your brain might rot. Don't do that. And I'm not, again, I've had some sort of funny interactions with a few of my techie pals, and they love to do that. Like, oh, no, I went to raves when I was a kid, now can't hear anything. What you gonna do? Go to see an audiologist and get a hearing aid and help your brain process that information better so you don't end up with dementia. Do that. Protect what you still have before it gets worse. Because even if you think it's bad now, oh, I can't hear anything, and I hear this ringing in my ears all the time, it can still get worse as you punish your ears more for the damage you've already done. I have to keep turning up the volume on my AirPods, and you're gonna keep doing more damage. So stop doing that. And here's yet another scientific study tracking that correlating trend. Treat your ears better, and you'll treat your brain better. I don't know about your brain. I like my brain. I love my ears. My ears, I've done a lot of damage to my ears. I used to be that kid that would stand in front of the subwoofer at like a warehouse party and just let it like wash over me. And I'd leave with my ears like totally muffled and like hearing ringing and stuff. And then I got into recording and like, wow, that was stupid. That was a really stupid thing for me to do. So now I not only do I not do things like that anymore, I always have earbuds or earplugs, even when something is just kind of too loud at Target. And I'll pop in some headphones and not listen to anything. So a little more kindness for your ears is what we're saying. Yeah, I can't even go to movies sometimes. Paul the T guy says, I never go to a concert now without earplugs, yet 10 years ago, standing 2 feet from the speakers and tinnitus all the way home. I mean, like, I'm even taking, like, my daughter has noise-canceling Bluetooth headphones that are built for little ears. They're from Puro, P-U-R-O Labs. They're kind of pricey, but surprisingly good noise reduction. When we go to movies, sometimes I will put those on her just to help muffle some of the incredible sound that a movie theater sound system is capable of. So, yeah, get used to listening a little quieter, like Fungi right here. The way I mitigate this is limiting my volume. I always use my V60 quad DAC at 50-75, never higher than that. That way I can know if it's too loud and limit the damage. So he's 2/3 up the way on the V60. Depending on the impedance of your headphones, that could still be incredibly loud. The quad DAC on the V60 is one of the most powerful portable amps that I've still ever tested. An order of magnitude more powerful than many of the other solutions. And to match it, you're looking at roughly a $150 dongle DAC just to match the acoustic output, the power output of the V60. So again, this is highly dependent on what headphones you're using. When I listen on an LG quad DAC, I'm typically at around 30 to 35, and anything above that is painful for me. You can retrain your ears and bring that volume back down. It takes some time and some critical listening, but you can reacclimate. You can get your ears accustomed again to listening a little quieter. But 2/3 is a good place to start. Like 2/3 the total power output of the V60 DAC, stay there. The reason why that amp is so powerful is because it can also drive much higher impedance headphones. It's not really there so that you can blow your ears out with like cheap earbuds. It is a audiophile grade component in a phone. But yes, fungi, that is a very good trend, and I'm going to put a challenge on you. See if you can get comfortable by the end of summer. See if you can get comfortable listening at 40 out of 75. See if you can just take it down 10 steps. Because they're smaller steps. It's not like a huge change, but it would be a significant change to the amount of acoustic force that your ears are occupying. So everyone in this chat, we're going to pat fungi on the back, and we're going to see, by the end of summer, can fungi step down 10 spots on his LG V60 quad DAC? Because I love y'all, and I want your ears to be healthy. I had another story. I don't really care. Galaxy S23 Ultra's 15-watt wireless charging is 33% slower than last year. Like, it's kind of just shooting fish in a barrel now of Samsung not living up to their marketing claims. So that'll be in the show notes. That'll be in the link. But I've already run so long. I want to get to the fun tease. I'm recording this April 17th, and in 16 hours, roughly, we will have the official presentation, the official reveal of the Xiaomi 13 Ultra. I'm not going to stay up for it. I'm going to replay it when I wake up, and I'm going to try and wake up a little earlier tomorrow so that, you know, I can kind of see what some of the reactions were. It has been a long time since I've been this excited about a 1-year smartphone upgrade. Where is it? It's on my desk. No. It's over here on my table. So this is my Xiaomi 12S Ultra. This is the first phone that I got to use that had this new 1-inch camera sensor, and this has become an incredible force in my mobile production. To the point where I genuinely believe that the conversation on this phone is more similar to owning a mirrorless camera, right? So if someone is used to taking casual social media snapshots on a Pixel, which I believe the Pixel still reigns supreme as the best, most streamlined point-and-shoot camera interface, putting a phone like the Xiaomi 12S Ultra in their hands, I believe would actually be a bad thing for their style of photography. In the same way that if someone is used to pulling a Pixel out of their pocket, pushing the shutter button, and putting the Pixel back in their pocket, if I gave them one of my Panasonic Lumix cameras, I believe they would take noticeably worse photos than doing the point-and-shoot Pixel style of photography. The sensor performance, the depth of field, the photographic characteristics of what these phones can do is more like the mirrorless camera than it is a point-and-shoot phone. Seeing some of the rumors coming out and seeing some of the early leaks and some of the teasers, the Xiaomi 13 Ultra has been my most anticipated phone of the year. And if everything comes to pass that we see in these rumors, to me, this is the high watermark for a content creator phone. What you will be able to do with this will be yet another step improved over what was already a revolution in mobile content on the Xiaomi 12S Ultra. And it's joining a conversation with its own sibling phone, the Xiaomi 13 Pro. My Vivo X90 is a monster performer. You can see that in action on my Saramonic video. And this Oppo that has been running the rounds, stunning. I cannot understate this. I can't undersell it. As soon as you step into a tier where you are looking at photographic composition, where you're looking at depth of field, where you're looking at the quality of the noise and the grain, where you're comfortable maybe firing up a manual mode or a pro mode from time to time, when you have an idea in mind for how you want your video to look, the composition tools on these phones are now nipping at the heels of significantly more expensive mirrorless cameras. So, GSM Arena has also kind of collected a few of these, and I'm linking to GSM Arena's coverage here too, On top of the early leaks that we already got, sort of the design of the phone, it looks like Xiaomi has already started putting out some of the teaser information. Who does it really not say? Oh, Mikhail. Oh man, I couldn't find the name. It's right there. It's right there. I just was looking for something that wasn't gray on white. But Mikhail over at GSM Arena, Xiaomi confirms 13 Ultra design ahead of announcements and details a new C7 screen. So we've got a look. This looks like the official Xiaomi press photo for the Xiaomi 13 Ultra. It looks stunning. It looks like we've got a slightly broader, flatter edge on the side of the phone, which should help because these phones are terrifying to use if they're all curved glass on both sides. We definitely see how pronounced that camera lump is because there's a section of the phone body that raises, and then there's another Oreo disc on top of that, which also contributes to the thickness, THICC-ness, of all of this camera stack, of it being a four camera phone. But then it sounds like they're not going to be using the current, where is it? Hold on. Okay, so this is also kind of interesting to me. They are not going to be using a Samsung OLED. In related news, this is from the article. In related news, Xiaomi also shared details on the 13 Ultra's LTPO OLED panel, which is jointly developed by Xiaomi and China Star. The C7 panel is confirmed to boast 1440p resolution and a maximum peak brightness of 2600 nits for HDR content. This is kind of a surprising trend. I have always held that in the world of like panel manufacturing, Samsung was the number one, LG was the number two, and then we had some of these other players that could make really, really good, high quality screens and displays. Like Sharp makes some interesting stuff. Over the last couple weeks, just reading up on some of the changes in like the TV market, Samsung has scaled way back on LCD development. LG has scaled way back on LCD. And it's very likely that when you buy an LG or a Samsung and it has an LCD, it's actually coming from a Chinese manufacturer. They might be slapping on a different film to do quantum dot or something like that. They might be playing around with some of the backlighting. But really, the panels are coming from a singular source, and then they're just slapping the name brand on the box. Increasingly, OLED manufacturing is starting to catch and surpass what Samsung and LG have been able to accomplish. I don't know that this C7 panel is going to outright beat a Galaxy. You know, whenever we do these like measurements of like phone brightness and color accuracy and all these intangibles, but right now Xiaomi seems confident in this collaboration to put this screen on their crown jewel Ultra phone. And that's kind of a big deal because if this phone missteps, if there's something up with this phone, that is a bad look for the company putting all of this effort into saying like, this is our best of the best, does everything the best. We're here for it. But it also highlights the confidence Xiaomi has in working with other brands. Xiaomi helped fund the development of the 1-inch sensor that we're enjoying on a variety of other players like Vivo and Oppo. Xiaomi got there first by working directly with Sony to develop this 1-inch camera sensor. Xiaomi being involved in the development of a new OLED, an LTPO OLED, a high-resolution Quad HD, high refresh rate OLED that can beat the maximum brightness of Samsung's best panel is kind of a big deal. And something tells me that we're going to see a shakeup. Now that Samsung is actually kind of at its weakest. Last week we talked about how like Samsung profits have dived. 96% profit fall year over year, and the lowest profits that the company has seen in 14 years. I feel a lot of these companies are smelling blood in the water. I think Xiaomi's looking at this landscape and saying, but why would we use their stuff? you know, if we jointly develop something like this and then other companies license it and use it, we make money on every other Vivo sold. We make money on every other Oppo sold. Why wouldn't we? Why wouldn't we contribute to the global parts supply just like Samsung has? So this could be a really big deal. I usually don't get that worked up or that excited about different screen technologies or who's making what or who's fabbing what. But over the last couple of weeks, it's been shocking to see how quickly the landscape changed. And this is like TVs and monitors. Now we're seeing an aggressive competitive edge being extended to phones too. And Chinese manufacturing on this is pretty incredible. I do have to throw out the El Jefe Reviews. Subscribe to Tier 1. They've been subscribed for 45 months, and Jeff says 3 more months. Hold on, let me look at this. Where'd it go? No, hey, Jeff, why can't I put this comment up? Oh, come on. That's so weird. I think my chat might have borked because I see good morning all. I see get El Jefe, but he wrote 3 more months at this and it'll be 4 years. 4 years, dude. 4 years. Thank you so much. I appreciate all the support. This has been awesome. I really do. Yeah, again, this type of stuff rocks my socks. And it's interesting, again, for a little Twitch stream like mine to see some of these kind of conversations that have gone on for years. It's fun. I like it better that way. So this is going back to the Xiaomi 13. This is going hand in hand with some of the camera specs that we've been seeing, whether or not this phone is going to get a variable aperture, which seems more like that it's true. I've been very conservative in saying I expect there to be a variable aperture on the Xiaomi 13, but we've even seen a leak of a press image that had the aperture hardware is kind of the background of the Xiaomi camera sensor there. So I really want the Oppo, but if the Xiaomi has a variable aperture, I have to get the Xiaomi. That is such a huge upgrade for everything that we were talking about. Tech Boy was asking about how do you make the background less blurry? Well, first you read my book, but then second, you have to understand composition. And then third, if we can add a variable aperture to a phone, we have a bit better control over light and depth of field. And there are so few phones that have tried this. Galaxy S9 and S10, the Xperia Pro I, and what am I missing? Oh, and the Huawei. The Huawei has a variable aperture. This would be the biggest sensor to ever have that kind of hardware capability. Again, we have to do a better job of dividing phone categories. Because I don't believe that the Xiaomi 13 Ultra is going to be the best productivity phone of the year. I believe that's going to be the Galaxy Note 23. But the Galaxy Note 23, Samsung is saying, oh, it's got these amazing cameras. The cameras are kind of the same as they were last year. The Xiaomi 13 Ultra looks like it's going to be the crown jewel content creation phone of 2023. So, yeah, I'm here for it. I'm very excited about where this might lead. And also, how are you all feeling about this design? Because it looks so industrial camera-like, I don't think it looks like a great phone. I think it looks like kind of an awkward phone, but it reminds me so much of like the Lumia 1020. This is the practicality of having to cram these massive camera sensors into something that still fits in your pocket. And I'm kind of here for it because it's a very practical look. I'm gonna play some of this teaser. I have to mute it just in case there's music, and I still might get this video bumped off of streaming services, but this is their Xiaomi teaser video. It kind of opens up, you see these like this faux leather back, the vegan leather back. There's no more division on the side, the back side of the phone. It just scoops into that larger camera sensor. Then it says 4.8, what did it say? 418 at 1900 GMT plus 8. But there's also another teaser, a leak image, that we might see an accessory. Hold on. The Xiaomi 13 Ultra, this is also from GSM Arena. But they tried to brighten up this press image. I can't show it. Hold on, let me see if I just scoop it up like that. So there's this teaser image of the phone mostly in shadow, but you can kind of see a bit of a grip and a shutter button that is illuminated. And the folks at GSM Arena tried to brighten up the image as much as they could. And you can see that there looks like there's a ring around the camera stack. And if we have a first-party solution for filters, I am gonna be so stupid excited. Like if we could put an ND filter on there, if we could put maybe even like magnifying elements like diopters, and then they've got a camera grip where we have like a shutter button, and it looks like maybe even a zoom rocker, which would be kind of a big deal too. If we have smooth zoom, and especially if the camera app can support it through more, like if we could keep a transfer to different camera sensors while shooting 4K 60, this looks like it's going to be the camera photography video solution of the smartphone world. As soon as you can start augmenting the use of this camera, I'm going to just shake it wildly on the screen right now for no good reason. I just think it looks silly. As soon as you can start augmenting how you control light and how you can throw filters on there, circular polarizers, ND filters, and diopters, this is a massive step. This is an incredible step for improving the quality of your content. I keep getting more and more excited over the potential of what Xiaomi might be able to pull off here. This is desperately what I was hoping for on the Xiaomi 12S Ultra, because we've got this ring. So the phone body stays pretty consistent. It doesn't scoop like the 13 Ultra, but then we've got this hard panel cutout. I guess I should hold it closer to my face because I have face tracking on. This hard panel cutout. So the 13 Ultra is going to get rid of this plastic panel. It's all going to be the vegan leather back. But because we have this hard ring, I was hoping Xiaomi was going to put out some accessories that you could snap onto this ring and use that to add like filters. If I could just get an ND filter on this, I would much better be able to control for lighting, especially for frame rates and video. Man, if Xiaomi does this with the 13 Ultra, it's going to get everything updated for my main criticisms of what's going on with the current 1-inch camera sensor phones. Aperture and filters and better hardware controls, huge, ginormous updates. Let me go back through here and get rid of these. Aditya Inil, lest you forget, Juan, the Samsungs from 3 years ago had a variable aperture, but for some reason they dropped the feature when their sensors got bigger. Not for some reason, it is very expensive. Adding hardware into the phone that can change the hole that lets in light on your camera has to be more durable than a standalone camera. You put so much more abuse on phones than you do on standalone or point and shoot cameras. And then when you make the lens assembly bigger, because you use a bigger sensor, all of that supporting hardware also gets bigger too. So you need more space in the phone to accomplish that. So a lot of like Samsung was dead on. I mean, having a variable aperture on a 1/2.55 inch type sensor is still a benefit. It helped clarity, it helped sharpness, it helped reduce that strange kind of like depth of field artifacting and fringing, like the flaring that you can get on photos, especially closer up. It was all good. It was all good. But it would have made their phones a lot more expensive. And what did we see? We saw Samsung blame lower sales on the Galaxy S20 on their phones being more expensive. And then on the S21, they tried to cut costs by cutting corners. And that didn't work either. So unfortunately, Samsung is in a restricting phase where they're trying to become more profitable by removing things from their products and making their products less evolutionarily distinct. Because like going from like a Note 20 to a Note 23, very iterative. Not a huge amount of change. Definitely polish and updates, little pieces of that have improved along the way, but it's not a radically different experience. It is a very similar experience. If you go back 4 years on Xiaomi, their products are unrecognizable. Where Xiaomi was 4 years ago to where Xiaomi is about to go today on this Ultra, very different. We're seeing a company executing an evolutionary process that is much more significant than Samsung and Apple claiming to be market leaders but putting out horrifically iterative devices. You don't get to be a market leader if you're not going to lead. I feel like this is abundantly clear. You're not a market leader if you sell the most phones, but you just pour more money into advertising, and then you just sort of keep using the same components over and over and over again. If you're not driving the market, you're a passenger. And right now, I should say BBK and Xiaomi brands are doing a lot more to move this part of the phone evolution process forward. I'll add the additional caveat. BBK, Xiaomi, and Sony are doing more to drive the evolution of smartphone photography than anything Samsung or Apple have done over the last 3 years. From Paul the Tea Guy, it's been nice that some of the largest tech YouTubers coming around to a 1-inch sensor on a phone. I still need us to be careful. I really don't like how large tech tubers talk about photography. I feel they do a significant disservice to the conversation, and they keep hyping up these comparisons like, oh, well, I mean, if you have a Galaxy Note 23, it's pretty much just as good as if you have this other 1-inch camera sensor phone, and that's average consumers and doing the basics and only using the auto mode because that's all an iPhone has. We've got to be really careful. If I put a 1-inch camera sensor phone in my aunt's hands, she will not turn out a better photo than she will on her iPhone. She's going to be unfamiliar with it. The where you focus is important because if you misfocus on a 1-inch sensor phone right now, it is a noticeable difference. It is very easy to deliver a not as good shot if you're not familiar with how this hardware works. And I genuinely believe that if that is your style of photography, just real basic point and shoot, you really should be kicking down to like a Pixel 6a. There's a reason why whenever a big time YouTuber does photo comparisons unlabeled, side by side, they put up 2 photos and they say, well, you vote on which one you like the bestest. Very regularly, it is the phones that win those kinds of showdowns are mid-rangers, less expensive devices, Pixel 6a's. I mean, you remember when Marquez was showing off the BlackBerry Key 2, and the BlackBerry Key 2 made it several rounds through his photography bracket. Everyone was panning the cameras on the BlackBerry Key 2, but when Marquez showed off really lazy composition, selfie-style social media photos, wouldn't you know it, the BlackBerry Key 2 did very well there. Why is that? Why do we seem to like these kinds of images from these types of phones? And it's because of all of the optical and HDR characteristics. The hardware is super mature. We understand the software. We know how to process those images. Yeah, they're better for that style of average consumer, low-level, basic point-and-shoot photography. If you put a better photographic tool into an average consumer's hands, they will not turn out a better photo. You can't AI your way out of that problem. It's a problem with familiarity and experience. If you have any desire for composing your frame, creating a piece of content, and trying to realize an image in your brain of what you think that subject should look like, immediately a larger camera sensor is going to turn out much better results. But you actually have to think a tiny bit. You can't let the phone do all the thinking for you. You let the phone do most of the thinking for you and you line up the shot the way you want it, boom, 1-inch camera sensor, totally gonna rock your socks. But I'm real tired of how these big time YouTubers keep just regurgitating marketing, because you get yourself in trouble on a Note 23. That sensor is bigger than most of the average consumer phones, like all the Samsung phones that really sell, like the Galaxy A series. Different animal. And Similarly to my conversation about 1-inch type sensors, boy howdy, if you're a tiny bit off in your focus, you can see how it softens up the part of the subject that you were hoping to land in focus. In my 200 megapixel comparison, where I compared the Note 23 against the Vivo X90 Pro, I showed I took a series of shots tapping the phone to focus in the same place on the Note 23. One of those absolutely nailed the focus, and you can see this rich, sharp clarity on the subject. And in that same situation, I'm sitting in the same position, I'm tapping on the same part of the screen, but that is, the pad of your finger is a very inaccurate tapping device. The tiny difference in focus acquisition made the subject look a lot softer in one of the shots, in one of the samples that I took. So if I were a less reputable tech commentator, I could have picked that photo and said, hey, look at how blurry and how soft the subject is. Isn't that awful? And I very much believe that some of these larger channels, not intentionally, but in the way that they kind of verify the bias of their audiences, tend to put more effort into the composition of the photo that they think is going to win. And then, they also pick up the other phone and just kind of tap wherever and push the shutter button, and that's fine. It's the same shot. But they didn't put the same care into composing the frame and making sure they got a sample that nailed the focus on that specific point, the same point that they did from the more popular phone. Because why put that effort in? You're not going to come to a conclusion where you really say, oh, but if you care about photography, maybe you shouldn't buy a Samsung. Because then you have the Samsung Knights, pitchforks and torches. So that's the thing that kills me is, if you really care about this stuff, there are photo tools that you might not have access to, and that kills me. We're not going to get stuff like this here in the United States until Sony brings it. I don't think Motorola is going to do it. OnePlus might. If we can get OnePlus back in the United States making a Pro phone, and it's a relative of the Oppo, that could happen, but it's not very likely. So right now, our best hope for a Sony sensor phone coming to the United States is Sony. And we'll see if they decide to revive the Pro series phones and give us a 1-inch type sensor with a variable aperture. Chef's kiss. Mwah. Still today, the Xperia Pro I is a monster photography tool. Sorry, Paul the T guy. I didn't mean to kind of go off on that. It's just, meh. It bothers me when it's like, oh, look, every single time we don't tell you what the phone is, suddenly the most popular phones aren't the foregone victors in our comparisons. Funny that, but I'm still going to keep making videos about how they're the bestest because more people buy them. It's a logical fallacy of appealing to the popularity and appealing to the majority, and I think it sets people up to buy phones that they actually won't like as much. And I think we see that happen a lot. The number of people like, well, they kept telling me Samsung was the best, and I tried this Galaxy A series, and I don't like it, so I guess I gotta buy an iPhone. We're losing consumers and tech enthusiasts every day to that kind of laziness. TK Babe. The white and gold trim looks good to me. Put a good case and we are good. I mean, again, I want that camera grip, dude. I want that camera grip and I want filters. So I might be rocking this phone without a case very, very delicately. Oh, Gormlord, absolutely. Gormlord says, I'd take a fat phone over a wonky, uneven phone, to be honest. The only reason why I'm a little less precious on the Xiaomi is because it's a camera dial, but it's centered. I mean, if you look, if we put this up next to the Vivo, the X90 Pro is an off-centered camera circle. So this phone does the waka waka waka. This phone, you put it down flat and it just stays flat. So I'm kind of okay with sort of a scoop or a bulge for that camera housing, but like you, I'd rather them just keep the phone of the body consistently thicker, give me more grip on the sides, and then you can put in a slightly larger battery. Yeah, Onscon. It lets you know that it's a camera phone, not just a normal phone. Rectangles are for the normies, circles are for the photographers. and can confirm, because within arm's reach, I still have my Lumia 1020 with a big Oreo disc of a camera module on the back. So circles are for photographers. If you don't have a giant circle bulge on the back of your phone, you probably like taking pictures, but you're not a photographer. That's just the way it is. I'm sorry, it's just how that goes down. You can have like cute little water drop camera sensors like an LG Velvet, but no, photographers. I'm totally being pissy. Absolutely being pissy. You can take some good pictures with a Pixel 7 too, I suppose. So from M Oculus, is that sensor going to find its way into other 2023 Xiaomi products like the Mix Fold? I don't believe so. I think folding phones are going to be one of those conversations for a while where they are not going to put in the more significant bulge. You need a lot of depth on a 1-inch camera sensor to get a good lens in front of that sensor. I think that's space for the next year, for this next iteration of folds. I can't say forever, but I don't think they're going to want something that is uber thin, can expand into being a tablet, but then have one big nodule on one side. I think impedes the use of that product. Until we get a lot more clever with maybe periscoping optics and off-center, like how maybe you have a line of camera sensors on the side and it closes like a book, things like that, until foldables show that we can stray from the traditional book format that we currently have, I don't think we're going to get 1-inch. But I know, like with Xiaomi and with Vivo, and also with Honor, we'll probably be seeing the 2/3 inch camera sensors pretty regularly. The 1/1.5 something inch type sensors, those should be pretty common on foldables over the next year. TK Bay saying possibly the lens attachments from the Concept 12S Ultra, question mark? I don't think so. So I think when we were looking, so TK is saying there was a Concept 12S Ultra where there was a 1-inch sensor, and then there was a second 1-inch sensor that was more in the center of this disc, and then you would take off this ring, and you could attach a lens mount that locked in a more DSLR style lens. I think for that to work, and someone please correct me if I have this optically incorrect, the sensor needs to be almost directly up against the protective glass on the back of the phone, and that's how you get the proper distance from the lens elements in the attachable lens to play nice with the sensor. I don't think the current ring that we're seeing with the Xiaomi 13 Ultra is going to allow for that kind of functionality. First of all, the sensor is still off-center. The 1-inch sensor is not the sensor that's most in the center. So I don't think we'll see that, but it could make it easier to attach other optics. Like, I don't think I have it handy. If you had like an anamorphic, my big trouble right now, I have a Beast Grip, and yeah, I don't have it accessible. I can't get it out easily, but I have an anamorphic Beast Grip lens, and it doesn't play nice with any of these larger camera sensor phones. They kind of designed it for the iPhone first, and then it kind of works with like a Note 23, especially if you use their mounts. But trying to put it on like a Vivo X80, not even the X90, but a Vivo X80, it's really hard to get it to line up in a cage and not have the image just be really blurry and distorted. If I could have a proper mounting solution off of a lens filter like that, and I could lock into place and put an anamorphic adapter right up against that off-center 1-inch sensor, that could work. That's the kind of stuff that I think would work well. You could also do that with a telephoto or with an ultra-wide, go with a crazy high magnification macro diopter. It would fringe and flare, but you would get like millimeters away from your subject on a 1-inch sensor with a variable aperture, so you could stop it down, get a little bit more image clarity. That could be huge. I love taking photos of flowers and snails. I'll roll around in the dirt with a phone camera for a week before I'll publish a review on it. That would be a big deal for me. Do do do. Yeah, Dave Burns. I want that faux leather on my phone. It feels so good. It feels so good. I still, because I don't have infrastructure to repair a Xiaomi, I still keep it in a case when I'm out and about. But this is so grippy and easy. It feels really nice in the hand. Gormlord, I'm actually downgrading because I found a refurbished LG Wing for super cheap and I'm stoked. Been watching your videos, getting hyped. I'm going to be writing up an article again. I probably won't make it into a whole video, but the Velvet Android 13 update is kind of pushing out to a couple different versions, and the Wing LG Android 13 update is pushing out. It has changed nothing about the LG skin or the operation of the phone. It's genuinely the same. But this is the last hurrah, I feel, for major updates coming from LG on these phones. We should celebrate that they lived up to all of their obligations and responsibilities in supporting their devices, just like they said they would. This is the best era of LG software we've ever seen after LG killed their smartphone department. So I've got to kind of tie it all up together. These phones have still been monster performers. I know we make fun of Easy for always making these videos about the LG V60, but show me what other phone is this feature complete. There is no phone made today that really does satisfy an LG V60 owner. I mean, I've got it right here. It's a huge tank of a phone. It's a big chunky boy, but it's dual display. So you can get a lot of the functionality of a folding phone, like a mini tablet folding phone, especially if you're into multitasking and using two apps at the same time. It's got the world's best mobile headphone jack. This is the best audio source that's ever been built into a pocket computer. It's got really good stereo speakers. The 1/1.7-inch camera sensor is still competitive today. We're only just now outpacing 1/1.7, but you can still get phenomenal photography and video out of this device. It's stylus enabled, and stylus enabled on both screens. So you can get a Wacom pen and use it on both screens, just like a Note, but with two screens. It has a really good desktop mode. It's just a slight nudge behind Samsung DeX, but you can use this as a pocket computer. Every single time we talk about a new phone, if you have an LG V60 as your daily driver, you have to give up a bunch of things if you really used all the parts of the Buffalo. So I can point, if you like the stylus support and the desktop mode, you're probably going to want to go Motorola. If you like the headphone jack, you need to go Asus or Sony. I mean, like, if you like the cameras, the manual modes, you can kind of get away with like a Galaxy. You maybe want to go Sony also, because if you want the ability to plug in a microphone, then you need the headphone jack. But if it's just about the photography, well, maybe you should instead be looking at one of these other like mega camera sensor phones. But if you go with like a Vivo, then you don't have a desktop mode. But if you go with Samsung, then you don't have a headphone jack. But if you go with a Motorola, then you don't have a headphone jack and the cameras aren't as good. And there is no one device that can satisfy all of the things that you can do with a V60 or even with a Velvet. Their mid-ranger phone in functionality is outpacing newer, more expensive phones. From Random Hobby, sadly Xiaomi software keeps disappointing me with weird bloat and strange issues with usability. Sadly, because they are the few phones that have the hardware I want, like a headphone jack and SD cards. We're starting to lose those too. The newest Poco still has a headphone jack, but it lost the micro SD card slot. Do I have it on my desk still? I do not. So yeah, we did lose the memory card slot on that new Poco. Is the X5? So that's disappointing. I haven't run into too many issues with Xiaomi software, but I also have to admit my use of Xiaomi phones has been a lot more limited because we're only just now starting to get some token support for United States 5G networks, and I can't go LTE only in my neighborhood. The LTE towers here are basically just ignored. All of the major networking upgrades from T-Mobile and from Verizon have been 5G networks. And I believe it's only now starting with my Xiaomi 13 that I can get some support, not all of the band support, but some of the band support for T-Mobile 5G. So I'm going to be spending a little bit more time, and especially when we see what goes on with the 13 Ultra, I really would like to make that a daily driver phone, but my use on the Xiaomi 12S Ultra has only been production. My 12S Ultra has never really been my all-in-one phone and camera. I purposely put my SIM card in another phone, like I've got my my Moto Edge Plus. This is a great phone that does phone things, and it's an incredible pocket computer with an okay-ish camera. But then I carry a 12S Ultra alongside it, and I got all the photo and video hardware that I need. So I can't comment as reliably on that. When I really live in a phone, you start to pick up on some of those other like software bloat, memory, those kinds of issues that can kind of color the experience. That's a different part of the conversation. But when it comes to the hardware, I typically stick to Xiaomi as that kind of specific. What is this phone trying to do? I think it does it well. The Xiaomi 12S Ultra is not a great productivity phone. It is an incredible content creation phone. I can at least comment on that. Simon says Hypno. I always see faux leather, but they are never available from carriers. You can have any phone as long as it's black, or an iPhone. We'll carry a few of the iPhone colors, but you don't get colors if you want a Moto, because that's bad. It's so dumb. Yeah, Aditya. I mean, like, I feel like this isn't quantified properly like it should be. The Pixel 6a winning the blind taste test was the solid proof we needed to convince a lot of folks that they needn't spend more money for their daily passive point-and-shoot images. And you can push a Pixel 6a camera pretty far, even if you do care about, like, oh, the composition and the depth of field and what I want to do and how do I want to achieve this look and shoot this video. It's a $400 phone. I mean, that's still really expensive for a lot of people that can't finance a phone. $400 is a lot to put on a phone. And that phone crushed a bunch of more expensive devices in a blind taste test. Why is that? It's because we have an eye for social media and the type of image processing that that phone does tactically well. Oh, Random Hobby, first time catching you. Well, hello from Italy. Thank you for dropping by. I definitely appreciate people jumping in and saying hey. So thanks for the, and also thank you for the contribution for the chat. Having the conversation is kind of critical. Random Hobby's also asking if I think Sony will put out a new Xperia 10 this year. I hope so, but I don't know. And I think Sony might be in an odd holding pattern based on what Qualcomm might be doing. So we're getting, the transition is from the 778 to the 7 Plus Gen 1. Sony has typically stuck with the 600 series chips. So if we get an Xperia 10 and Sony sticks with the 695, I don't think that's going to be a good evolution phone. I think it's going to be kind of the same Xperia 10 that we had from before. They can spruce a few things up, but that's not a big jump. I would love to see Sony take the Xperia 10 and start putting in like a 778. The Snapdragon 778 is a monster chip, and that would at least catch the Xperia 10 up to phones like the Nothing. If we do that, that could be kind of cool, but I really don't know. Sony is very conservative in how they put out phones, and they might slow play this until they see the SoC market change up. Oh, Dave. Dave says, ugh, here we go again. Standing the master of none LG. More like masters of fail. Yuck, 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 yuck. I'll never let it go. We lost huge when LG stepped out of the market. Huge. You can pick up an LG G8 today, and it is still a monster performer compared against newer, smaller phones getting put out today. and you still have the absolute best multimedia experience capable from that screen and that quad DAC. That phone is going to go toe to toe against expensive DAPs, digital audio players, standalone MP3 players. An LG G8 today is going to punch way above its price tag. You can go. I think if you get the FIO, I think the FIO is running Android 11 on something like a Snapdragon 695, and I want to say it's like a $500 DAP. This is off my memory. I'm probably wrong. Please someone correct me in the comments. But a FIO DAP, standalone digital audio player, is going to be, what, 3 times more expensive than buying an old LG G8? Is maybe going to be twice as expensive if you can find a refurb of the LG G8. And it's going to be demonstrably less powerful as a computer. It's going to be a lot more limited in what you can play on it. And the G8 is going to be way better for things like video streaming, in addition to also being an incredible DAC amp combination to play your audio. So it's a tough sell. If you can get your hands on an old LG, and actually, you know, what's funny is that it probably got better software support than what the DAP is going to get for its entire life cycle. So you'll at least be even a little bit better ahead on things like security patches, which I'm sure MP3 players get all kinds of updates and security patches. Gormlord, the Moto stylus is... Moto is just passive stylus, though. That's boring. I need them to step it up to active. That's not true. Moto Edge Plus, this is a full... I don't know what digitizer is in the phone, but when you pull it out of the case, it has the same kind of pop-up interaction. It's a full active pressure-sensitive stylus. There's this little button on there, and let me make sure I still have it set up because I had to wipe out this phone. Yep. So here it is. Here's the camera. Let me take like a weird profile selfie shot, and here's my Moto stylus, and I click the button, and it takes a terribly composed mirror image photo of myself from the rear camera. I'm taking photos. I don't know how much more active we can make a Moto stylus. It's competitive against a Note. And then you put it in the little sleeve here on the back, and the phone wirelessly charges it, and you're good. It's a great stylus. This is a better stylus experience than what we had on the LG, because we had to use those Wacom Wacom compatible styly, and there was no Bluetooth on any of those. So, I mean, what else would you want, Gorm Lord? I don't know what else you can do to a stylus. No, Random Hobby, this is absolutely accurate and bugs the pee out of me too. In explaining some of those software issues, Random Hobby says the Xiaomi kills every background app, and just switching apps like from chats to YouTube both would reload, so that was so upsetting. You can jump through some of the hoops to make it a little bit better, but you're absolutely correct that the multitasking on a lot of these, especially the Chinese phones, and this could kind of touch on like OnePlus performance as well, very aggressive in managing the background draw and battery life. So that's less good. I'm with you on that. That is absolutely something where I am a grown-up, and I know if I have this service running in the background, it's going to tank my battery life. I still want it, or I still need it, and you should let me manage the performance of my phone. But you know that they're doing it because they got to complain, oh, your battery life is terrible. And then they would look and you're like, yeah, but you're running like 40 services in the background while you're also streaming Spotify. And it sucks, but you know. Oh, I'm way behind on this chat. Let's see. Tech Boy saying the LG G8 from Verizon you can get for $89. So 89 bucks, and you have one of the best DAC amps on the market today. If you were to buy a THX rated DAC with a Sabre, a THX rated amp with a Sabre DAC, like in the THX Onyx, that's a $200 dongle DAC. That $200 dongle DAC only slightly outperforms the audio performance of the LG G8. You can get a whole phone for $90, or you can get a comparable dongle DAC for $199. And I need people to understand what we lost when we lost LG in this audio space. Every single audio streaming site is coming out with HD audio or high-res audio or all these spatial audio things. You know what makes audio better is a monster DAC amp. Then you can drive any headphones you want, any earbuds you want, and you get the absolute best hardware source to then drive that HD or high-res experience. And you can now get a whole phone for less than half the price of a dongle DAC that performs a tiny bit better than the built-in headphone jack on the LG G8. And Random Hobby, I'm literally mourning the back-mounted fingerprint sensor too. My wife doesn't want to leave the older Pixels because they have the rear-mounted fingerprint sensor and they have a headphone jack. We talked about it again. I told her, like, hey, if you want to keep up with this kind of hardware, your next phone is probably going to be a Sony. Because I don't think she's going to like the Pixel 6a. I don't think she's going to like the in-display fingerprint sensor, and I don't think she's going to like losing the headphone jack, and she has nowhere else to go. We're going to have to look at an Xperia 5. That's it. That's all that's left. She is a tiny, petite, adorable little woman, and she has tiny, petite, adorable little elfin hands, little hobbit hands like me, and she wants a hardware fingerprint sensor, so she's going to have to move from the back of the phone to the power button, but the last game in town for her to have a little phone that has a headphone jack is an Xperia. McCorcoran is saying the BTR 5 is $120. The BTR 7 is $200. Now, I love my BTR 7. This has helped tremendously in extending the acoustic properties of LG style DAC amps to all of my phones that are lacking a headphone jack. So if I want that LG style performance where I could just hold the phone and plug directly into the phone, instead I have a phone and something that's a little bit chunkier than an what was it, the iPod Nano? Or was it no, it wasn't the Mini. This is about the thickness of an iPod Mini, but it's not, it's narrower than an iPod Mini. It wasn't, I think it was the Nano. It was the flatter, longer one. You also have to keep this charged and connected and supported. BTR 7 is a monster, and it's real good, especially if you're connecting over like LDAC, but it's a whole separate thing. This you have to carry this to get what used to just be built into the bottom of our phones. I don't feel like that's progress. I feel like that's the opposite of progress. Not from Theo. Theo is doing a great job of that. But I just mean a BTR 5, which is a smaller and less high power version of this Bluetooth DAC, is still more expensive than an LG G8. Your bang for buck is questionable. Yeah, JV. And you can go back a ways on this. JV says, I cracked the screen on my LG V30, but I'm still using it as an MP3 player now, connecting to cabled active speakers or headphones. So I feel like this is still in that comparable ballpark back to the V20. The LG V10 has a very good headphone jack. The V20 is when we really took off with impedance sensing and this quad DAC. What the quad DAC does to filter internal self noise and deliver a better signal to noise ratio and a more pure audio characteristic. That's where we also started playing with like the filters. Filters on audio gear are not like filters on camera gear. This is not manipulating the sound of the source. It's about changing the characteristics of how the headphone jack connects to headphones and speakers. I can go deeper on that later. It's not for this podcast. But I would say if you start with a V20 you're in really good territory. The V30 was a nice small step up. The V50 is when we changed the sort of tuning characteristics. Meridian was a part of this conversation for a while. And then we top out with the V60, where I don't believe there was any co-branding. It's all LG. And so there are pros and cons as you move through the chain of V20 to 30 to 40 to 50 to 60, but all of them are fantastic. They're all excellent. And by the time we get to the V60, it's very similar to the V20, but we do see improvements to things like total amp output. I like the volume stepping a little bit better, so the changes in volume are a little bit more refined. And then also little things like signal to noise still continue to improve, even though now we're at a tier where it's like scientific improvements that maybe no human ear could ever hear. Yeah, random hobby, BTR 3K. That is a huge little puck of Bluetooth audio goodness. He says, I can run 250 ohm cans, no problem. Totally, totally. I mean, you got to jack up the volume on that BTR3, but that's what Marie is using. And I mean, I remember demoing it with my Bear Dynamic, my DT770s that are up there on the shelf. And those ran pretty well too. My HD25s are 90 ohms. I want to say 80 or 90 ohms. I can't remember. Easily covered by a BTR3. Fantastic. Oh, Onscon saying they were probably thinking about Moto's cheaper stylus phones. Yeah, I had one over there somewhere. And I also have the TCL stylus. So yeah, those are passive. Same thing with like the LG Stylo. Sure. The last Stylo did have the digitizer though, and you could use a Wacom stylus on the LG Stylo. But the stylus it came with was a passive capacitive stick. But that's also what's critical is I spent $450. This phone cost me $450 to replace the Verizon model with this unlocked model. For $450, you have all the capabilities. Well, I mean, I guess $450 and then you have to buy the stylus and case separately. But then you have all the capabilities of a $1,000 note. So again, I don't want to put out a broad blanket statement like Moto has passive styluses when their most expensive phones have active styluses. Got to be specific and say the cheapest Moto phones have a passive stylus and the Moto Edge Plus has an active Bluetooth connected stylus just like a Note 23, and you can get it for like a third the price on sale. Uh, Dave Burns, it's a chunky iPod Nano. BTR 3K is 70 bucks, so that's pretty good. But for 70 bucks, you've got a Bluetooth puck, or you could get an LG G8 for 90. So for $20 more, it's a whole phone and computer. Okay, sorry. I'm using the Red Magic 5S as my headphone jack device. I've got my Red Magic, this is the Red Magic 7 Pro. Really solid headphone jack on this thing. Great amp. Not as good. Not as good as an LG G8. This is good for a phone, and it'll easily outpace like the amp on a Sony, on an Xperia. Man, LG's got a beat. It's real solid. The only ones I haven't been able to test recently are the Asus. If an ROG phone still has an amp and a DAC that can go toe-to-toe with an LG, and I don't know that that's true. I haven't seen any people really testing that to see if it's comparable still. So logically, Nix. I do think repairability is a big deterrent for me on Xiaomi and Vivo phones. I've repaired many Samsungs, LGs, Motos, and Apple devices, and OnePlus to boot. Parts are easier to find as well as repair guides. And this is why, like, I am importing these phones. I am not making the same kind of recommendation that people import a Xiaomi Ultra. I am doing this because I need to have this conversation about what we're missing here in the United States. I cannot make the same recommendation that someone do this as their sole daily driver phone. Like I described, I've got a Moto over here that is very easy for me to replace if I smash this Moto. Even not on the same sale, this is still a $500 phone if I want to swap it out. It's cheaper for me to buy another Moto than it is for me to repair a Moto right now. But I can combine that with my Vivo or my Xiaomi. I don't know if Michael Peppertech ever got his X80 Pro back, but he imported an X80 Pro because he was doing coverage on it and he wanted to test out the cameras and he really liked it, but he smashed the screen. And there's a fly on me. He was working with the company that imported the phone for him, or exported the phone for him, to get it repaired. It was going to be a process. This is not a casual, oh, if you want the bestest camera, just import your phone. But it is to highlight, like, we're not getting this tech here. And if you are of the means to support importing a phone, this is how you can do it. But it's, to your point right there, absolutely accurate. You do not have the same access to repair parts and to support. You are going to be an island unto yourself. From Logically Nix, can you answer the size of the sensor question? For what device? Logically Nix, if you can tell me what you mean. The IMX 989 is a 1-inch type sensor that's a tiny bit larger than the 3:2 aspect ratio formats that were used in like Sony bridge cameras. It is just a hair taller sensor in that 4:3 aspect ratio than Super 16 millimeter film. It's a 16.5 inch, excuse me, 16.5 millimeter diagonal. So it is slightly bigger than Super 16. Is it 16.5 or 16.8? I don't remember. But it's a crop factor of around 2.5 or 2.6, which puts it just a small step behind Micro Four Thirds sensors at a crop factor of 2, if that's what you mean by sensor sizes. Oh, McCorcoran, I didn't catch that. He says, I think Michael Peppertech decided not to have it fixed unless I missed the latest update. That's a bummer. It might have been just too much and too long to have it imported and exported, and these are expensive phones, but that is kind of a bummer if he couldn't ultimately get it fixed. Oh, okay, so here, let's see. Logically Nick says, the question I had earlier on was, is the delay on adoption of a 1-inch sensor part to blame with the size of the camera module for both Apple and Samsung? Both companies have tried to have slim, neat devices, so to speak. I think it's in part why rock the boat if the phones are still selling? So I believe in the United States specifically, Samsung and Apple view each other as their primary competitors. They occupy about 80% of the United States smartphone market. So that means they don't need to challenge other international phones that aren't really shipped or sold or distributed here. And I unfortunately think that that has sort of an effect on the whole rest of the international smartphone market. Samsung is building phones for where they sell the best. And right now they've got a lock on North America, especially because of the way we do carriers here. So I feel like one part is just the apathy. You know, why make the effort if it's not really going to sell you any more phones and it's going to upset the Apple cart? And you might make Apple compete even harder for their next generation of iPhone. You can just kind of fall into a comfortable pattern of iteration. Like I said, from the Note 20 to the Note 23, very minor differences to that experience. The other thing that I think is costs. If you want to make a healthier margin on your product, if you want to make more money and build more profit into every phone sold, you don't put in more expensive pieces and parts. You work the best deals you can on how to source the parts that you can get, reaching out to your distribution partners, and then it allows you to make smaller changes year over year over year to things like the hardware of the phone. So, like, aesthetically, a Note 23 looks a little bit more different than a Note 20. A Note 20 had a very different camera module assembly on the back, but from the Note 20 to the S21 Ultra to the Note 22 to the Note 23, I don't think we've seen a radical re-engineering of the frame. So yeah, it is a very complicated process getting all the parts to fit inside a phone, but you're making these tiny little adjustments. You're not making a larger structural adjustment. So you have the same size sensor. The sensor size in the Note 20 is a tiny bit smaller than the Note 23. But we're talking a very small difference. It could probably fit in the same overall camera module housing. So you don't need to completely reinvent the wheel. You can kind of piggyback off of that. The second you go to a 1-inch sensor, you've got to do a much bigger re-engineering of how all those pieces fit. For Apple's situation, they just keep making those bumps a little bit bigger, but they're keeping that camera square, largely in the same place and wrapped around the same kind of guts of the phone. Again, it's been a smaller iteration on moving up that sensor size. So I really think it's just they're coasting on the momentum of their current phone sales. They don't see any economic pressure from these players in the markets where they've got carrier deals. And it makes the phone more expensive, but they're not really going to sell a significant number of phones based on that one feature. So to me, it's that trifecta. As soon as you have that kind of duopoly, those two companies have no incentive to compete. Every single time we see another player that is able to disrupt, that's where we get the biggest gains in any type of consumer space. When LG was still a player in South Korea, LG kept Samsung on their toes. When Huawei was nipping at the heels of being the #1 Android manufacturer and started outselling Samsung in a number of regions, that's where we saw Samsung doing their most daring evolution from the Note 9 to the Note 10 to the Note 20. That era of Samsung was really strong because they were facing down Huawei with the Mate series specifically. So until we have something like that, we're stuck. I think Samsung and Apple are going to continue to circle each other, and the rest of the market is going to go off in other directions that they try to differentiate themselves with. Sorry, that was really long-winded, but that was a great question, so thank you for asking it. I mean, tell me Samsung Knights aren't doing some similar stuff too now, though. Dave says, Apple true believers will defend their slow playing as waiting until the technology is ready. Apple is already working with Sony. I mean, Sony is their main supplier of camera sensors. The 989 is not hypothetical. This camera sensor is a monster. And the only thing I'm waiting on is to see if Sony can create a version of the 989 Exmor so that it has high-speed readout, so I can have 4K at 120 frames per second on a 1-inch sensor with a variable aperture. And at that point, this game is locked up. If I could get an Xperia Pro i2 with those kinds of specs on it, that is the content creation phone of the year, whenever it comes out. I don't care about 8K, fine, sure, but 4K 120 is the most flexible video shooting where you can create content in 30 frames per second, you can step up to 60, you can go half speed, slow motion, it'll fit any timeline that you want to put it in. It is incredible. I've got so many family videos of Lex like running around a zoo, shot from my Xperia 1 Mark IV and from my OnePlus 10, and it's just stunning. You take one little second of a kid running by like the orangutan habitat at the zoo, and the hair is bouncing and the wind is blowing, and you stretch it to 1/4 speed, and it is 4 times the resolution of any other phone's slow motion, and every strand of hair is crystal clear and crisp as sunlight is bouncing off, and like everything is dramatically slowed down. If you have not tried shooting 4K 120 from some of these phones that can do it, you are really missing out on incredibly dynamic and dramatic video footage, even for something as silly as like, hey, we took Lex to the zoo and here's a little family video of it. Amazing. Just absolutely incredible. Logically, Nix, this question doesn't really make sense, I think, in the way that you're asking it. Does the simplification of the focus by a 1-inch sensor need to happen first? If you mean the depth of field, that's not a simplification, it is a complication because you need a variable aperture for a longer depth of field. This is why I talk about 1-inch sensors being for more photo enthusiasts, because you have to know a little, if you want your subject and your background to be better and focused, there's a way to do that on a fixed aperture camera. But it takes the experience of knowing how to compose your shot and how to line up your elements so that you get what you want. When I show it off, I'm always trying to show off the shallowest depth of field because I feel that is a much more dramatic look that highlights the subject and I get a sense of the background. I don't care if my wife is crystal clear. This is what I want to mean. Let's say me and my wife go to Paris. I don't care if the Eiffel Tower is crystal clear sharp behind my wife, who is the subject of my photo. My wife is in Paris, I take a picture of her, and the Eiffel Tower is behind her. We know what the Eiffel Tower looks like. I don't care if the Eiffel Tower is as razor sharp and in focus as she is. There is a suggestion of the landscape behind her where everyone's gonna know where we were. And she is the subject of my photo because I love her more than I love a building. That is a photographic composition decision that I am making, and I don't worry about what the ramifications of someone seeing that photo on social media are gonna be because they know that landmark. If I want my wife standing in front of Mount Rushmore, and I want Mount Rushmore more in focus alongside my wife, I have to change where I stand to get a photo of all of the participants so that they are better balanced and in focus. And I can do that. That is what we talk about. So we have too many tech YouTubers that are like, it doesn't take gooder photos because look, that's blurry. How do I know where I am if it's blurry in the background? And that's an idiot. That person is either putting on an act as they shoot their footage with cinema grade cameras to make the tastiest, blurriest backgrounds for holding a phone up in their office, and someone who is pretending to not know how to do things, or they genuinely don't know how to do things. I don't know what's worse. I kind of feel like the first one's worse because they're playing the part of a dumb person to try and make it seem like they're just one of the regular Joes. How do you say Suspiria XII1 Mark III? Oh, but I shot this all on my Sony a7S IV. And they don't have any problems with the camera having that kind of naming convention. But how do you even say, I don't get how Suspiria works? Idiots, or pretending to be idiots. And both are really dumb. Both are bad for the future of our tech conversation. So simplification of the focus is not what I think you think it means. It is a composition challenge. But if you're interested in photography, it's a composition challenge that has a solution. And you have to make choices in any moment given what is it that I'm trying to take a picture of and what do I care about in this frame. If it's person standing in front of a building, that's a challenge. And you can solve it. And it requires you to move around and compose a different kind of shot, but you can do it. If it's the subject of this photo is the person, you want that 1-inch sensor because then the person will be the subject of the photo and there will be less distracting you behind your subject. And that's what's critical and that's what's lost in our conversation because people still keep acting like phone cameras are the same things they've been since the iPhone 4. Phone cameras are not the same things that they've been since the iPhone 4. They are practical tools that we can use for a variety of different compositional challenges. And there is this crazy book. You can check it out. If you go to Amazon, if you have like a Kindle or you read books through the Kindle service, you can catch Smartphone Photography for Noobs. The main title of the book is Take Better Photos. So that's how that works. There's a book. I'm way behind on this chat. Let's see. Yeah, Dualos. The real story is that Sony is baller with all these camera sensor deals. Logically next. So, okay. So you're saying simplification for normies, but again, simplification is a word that doesn't work because it's a complication. Your photography as a technical craft doesn't get better until you complicate the craft. And so this also leans into how much I detest tech reviewers that hold $1,000 phones up and say, but average consumers, because the vast majority of smartphone sales happen at $400 or less. There is no average consumer that accidentally trips and $1,000 falls out of their pocket. No, I guess I gotta use this phone. That doesn't happen. In iPhone land, iPhone owners seem fine paying $800 for a basic phone experience. An iPhone 14 is kind of what should be just a mainstream daily driver phone. I feel we've lost, as tech enthusiasts, that consumers in the Apple ecosystem think it's okay to spend $800 on covering the basics. But that doesn't happen in Android land. In Android land, we have a much wider variety of mid-ranger and entry-level solutions that tackle that basic use phenomenally well. And I'll hold up a phone like a Galaxy A52, a Pixel 6a, the variety of Redmi and Poco devices and Realme devices, getting into like the Vivos, like I've got a V27 here on my desk. This phone is gonna be, what, sub $400 Euro MSRP, and it is an incredibly powerful phone for its price tag. So there is no gotta dumb down $1,000 phone for normies that buy $1,000 phones but only use them to do the most basic things with. The closest we get is Samsung's market share, and the entire collection of Galaxy S phones sells roughly 20 million, 25 million. It's less than 10% of Samsung's market. Samsung will sell roughly 260 to 270 million phones a year. About 25 million of them are Galaxy S in total. Galaxy S, Galaxy S Plus, Galaxy Note. So that person doesn't exist. Every single time you see a tech reviewer hold up a $1,000 phone and, but what about my great aunt who can't use phones because she's basic? She was never gonna buy this phone. The idea of selling someone this phone is a complete fabrication. That does not exist. At least it doesn't exist to a statistically large enough margin for us to make videos about it. Someone out there is going to spend a whole bunch of money because they heard the phone was the bestest and it was expensive, and they can flex that they spent a lot of money on that phone. Can't stop that. But that is a tiny sliver of a minority of a small demographic of devices that are overrepresented on YouTube but do not pan out in sales. If we made videos like people bought phones, you would almost never hear about ultra-tier devices, and you'd see dozens and dozens and dozens of videos every day about the Galaxy A52, about the Galaxy A14. That's all we would be talking about. So again, simplification is a difficult word to work into a conversation about photography, because I think what you mean is like the ease of use in a point and shoot situation. And that's where I immediately have to point out, those people are already voting with their wallets. They're already buying Pocos and Realmes and Redmis and Galaxy A series and Pixel A series. And those phones are doing a phenomenally good job of covering their low-level, simplified photography needs. The new Poco X5 camera is roughly the same image sensor size as a 1020. And it's super basic, and you can't get 4K 60 video on it, but it handles this photography challenge pretty well, and it's a 299 euro phone. So the consumers have already decided. It's the tech enthusiasts who think average consumers are doing things that they're not doing, and they're basing it off of like the sales numbers of North America, and they're not really looking at what devices are really selling. And they're making up a demographic so that they can deliver a review that's way lazier. But I mean, I'm here to review this for average consumers. What are the basic people gonna do with this? So I don't need to dig any deeper, and I don't need to work any harder. But what if your uncle got this phone and he doesn't know how to do things like use a manual or pro mode? That's such a dog whistle hypothetical. It does not exist. It's not real to any statistical degree that we would have to worry about consumer harms in this market, but it makes for a much easier video to produce, right? It is much cheaper to spend 10 minutes with a OnePlus 11 and go, oh, but yeah, like I took a picture of this crappy fire hydrant. Oh, I don't think the colors are as good. Oh, well. And it's fake. That's all fake. That has nothing to do with what people are actually trying to accomplish on their phones. In a world of video streaming services and social media, that's not it. Tech reviewers are so far off the pulse right now, it's disgusting. It's really frustrating. Sorry, Random Hobby. Yeah, I went a little dark on idiots, but they're either really stupid or they're pretending to be stupid, and both are bad. Yeah, the average consumers. Yeah, we're about to hit 3 hours here. You're right. We should probably wrap this thing up. I'm at 2:53:40, and that's with the 5-minute lead in. Whew. Yeah, there are some other questions and stuff in here. Like I said, I went off so long there. This is the longest podcast I think we've turned out in a while. Dave Burns, you derailed. You caught me right at the beginning. Don't act like you weren't contributing. So apologies, I'm not going to be able to catch all these other questions and comments and stuff like this. My voice is actively failing on me right now, so we should probably clean this up. So logically, I'm not going to dig into that. I don't shoot with selfie cameras because why would you ever shoot with the worst camera on your phone? Selfie cameras are for video calls. If you have a really good camera on your phone, including a 1/2-inch sensor, a 1/3-inch sensor, a 1/1.3 or a 1-inch sensor, start taking rear camera selfies. You get comfortable turning the phone around and taking the photo, and you will never go back to a 1-inch sensor. Let's see if I can just like pop that right there. Pop. And I can see my eyeball is right in line with that camera. Pop, pop, pop. Pop, pop, pop. Just get good. And then you never have to worry about, oh, does this have a good selfie camera on it? Because it's always garbage. The selfie camera is garbage. It is the worst camera on your phone. But hey, I've got to get this memory with my family. Garbage. Get good. Okay, so folks, I want you all to have an amazing week. I'm not going to be live tweeting or jumping in on the announcement for the Xiaomi 13 Ultra tomorrow. I got to get some sleep. Last couple nights I've been having some issues with some insomnia, so I'm gonna sleep through it. I'm gonna sleep like a baby. But I'm gonna wake up tomorrow in the AM for Pacific time, specific Pacific time, and we're gonna have a look. We're gonna see what Xiaomi actually reveals and announces, and then I'm gonna claw my way through all the sites that can import a phone and try and get in line to put my money down on a Xiaomi 13 Ultra to get it here as aggressively and as quickly as I can. So, folks, have some fun. You have tech right now that is incredible. I saw someone in there mentioning, hey, I've got a Pixel 3a. Do you know what? The Pixel 3a is still a monster mid-ranger phone today. Go do something fun. And I'm going to come up with a challenge like someone else had mentioned, maybe like an old phone challenge or a photography challenge. We did a podcast challenge. And I got some incredible audio from folks recording interviews and conversations from their phones. Guess what? It's way better doing that from a phone than it is from most laptops. We are not getting our money's worth if we're pretending that this conversation about average basic people represents the true power of these pocket computers. And it's so much more fun when you push the limits of what these things can do. So, have an amazing week. Do awesome with your technology. Be awesome with your technology. And I'll catch you all back here next week for another episode of the Monday Morning Tech Chat Show on the SGGQA podcast channel. Be safe. Take care of yourself so you can take care of others. And I'll catch you back. I love y'all.